Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the cold, fish-stinking reality of medieval fishing villages, and trust me, you're going to want your modern life back before we even get to the part about the communal toilet situation. Picture this. It's barely dawn, somewhere around 1300 CE on the English coast. The air is thick with salt spray and something far worse, the sickly sweet rot of yesterday's fish guts fermenting in the sun. You're about to open your eyes in a world where fresh seafood means whatever didn't kill someone yesterday, and your entire existence revolves around dragging protein from an ocean that's actively trying to murder you. The average life expectancy here? Maybe 40 if you're lucky and the dysentery doesn't get you first. You probably won't survive this. And honestly, after 12 hours of medieval fishing village life, you might not want to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing this community span the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you isn't the sound, it's the smell. You're lying on what passes for a bed in your tiny cottage. A wooden platform covered with a thin layer of straw that hasn't been changed in. Well, you've honestly lost track. Could be weeks, could be months. The straw is compressed into a matted, scratchy surface that's absorbed every bodily fluid you can imagine and several you'd rather not think about. There's no mattress, no sheets, just this medieval excuse for bedding that's currently hosting a thriving ecosystem of fleas, lice, and what you desperately hope aren't bedbugs. Your blanket singular, because you only have one's a rough woolen thing that weighs approximately 700 pounds and provides warmth through pure suffocation rather than any actual insulation technology. It smells like wet sheep, because it essentially is wet sheep, just processed slightly. The lanolin never quite washes out. Not that washing happens frequently in a fishing village where every drop of fresh water is precious. But back to that smell. It's seeping through the gaps in your wattle and daub walls. Those charming medieval structures made of woven sticks plastered with a mixture of mud, clay, animal dung, and straw. Yes, you live in a house partially constructed from manure. The walls are deteriorating, they always are, and the gaps let in not just the smell but also the cold, the damp, and occasionally small rodents who've decided your home is their home too. The smell itself is a complex bouquet of awfulness. There's the brine from the sea, sure, but that's the pleasant part. Mixed in is the concentrated essence of fish processing. Scales, guts, heads, tails, all the bits that don't sell at market, piled up in various corners of the village and left to decompose. Your neighbors dump their fish waste basically wherever's convenient, which is often right outside their doors. In summer, this creates a soup of rotting organic matter. In winter, it freezes into awful little monuments that thaw periodically and release concentrated stink bombs. And because your cottage is maybe 15 feet from your neighbor's privacy wasn't really a medieval concept, their fish waste is essentially your fish waste. The village is basically one long, narrow strip of cottages crammed along the harbor, each one leaking smells into the next like some kind of olfactory nightmare domino effect. Then the bells start. The church bells. Because of course the church has bells, and of course they're ringing at an hour that any reasonable person would call still nighttime. It's around 4:30 in the morning, which in medieval fishing villages is practically sleeping in. The bells aren't gentle either, theory aggressively loud, designed to wake every soul within a 2-mile radius and remind them that God is watching and also you're late for your backbreaking labor. You peel yourself off the straw bed, your back already protesting. You're probably in your mid-20s, but you feel about 60. That's what happens when your job involves hauling heavy nets, bending over constantly, and sleeping on what amounts to a wooden plank with decorative straw. Every fisher in the village has a permanent hunch, twisted hands from rope work, and a collection of injuries that never quite healed right because medieval medicine's approach to workplace accidents was basically rub some dirt on it and pray. Your cottage is one room. That's it. One room serving as bedroom, kitchen, living room, storage area, and workshop. The space is maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, and you're sharing it with your spouse. Your 3 kids who survived infancy, you had 5. But let's not dwell on medieval child mortality rates right now. And whatever fish you brought home yesterday that needs processing. The floor is packed dirt. Not tile, not wood dirt. The kind that turns to mud when it rains, which is often because you're on the English coast and dreary drizzle is basically the default weather setting. You've tried to keep it swept, but there's fish scales ground into it, bits of straw, the occasional lost possession that's just become part of the floor now. In one corner, there's a depression where water pools when it rains and seeps through your thatched roof. Speaking of the roof, you can hear rain pattering on it now. That's not ideal. Thatched roofs are marvels of medieval engineering when they're well-maintained. They can last 20 years and provide excellent insulation. But well-maintained requires money and time, neither of which you have in abundance. Your roof has thin patches where you can literally see daylight, and when it rains, you've strategically placed a couple of wooden bowls to catch the drips. This creates a pleasant indoor rainstorm effect that really adds to the ambience of your deteriorating hovel. The hearth dominates one walla simple fire pit with a hole in the roof above it to let smoke escape. Theoretically, in practice, your cottage is perpetually hazy with smoke because medieval ventilation is more of a suggestion than a science. The smoke is supposed to help preserve the thatching and kill insects, which it does, but it also kills your lungs slowly. Respiratory diseases are rampant in fishing villages, and now you're understanding why. You're basically living in a slow-motion smokehouse, and you're the meat, next to the hearth. Your cooking equipment, one iron pot, a couple of wooden bowls, some spoons, a knife. That's the entire kitchen inventory. There's no stove, no oven, no refrigeration, obviously, not even a proper table. You cook over an open fire, every meal, in the same pot you cooked yesterday's meal in, which you cleaned by wiping it out with a rag. Mostly. Sometimes you rinse it with seawater if you're feeling fancy. Your furniture situation is equally dire. There's the sleeping platform, a rough wooden bench, maybe a stool or two, and a chest where you keep your other outfit. Yes, outfit singular. You own 2 sets of clothes, the ones you're wearing and the slightly less disgusting ones in the chest. Both are made of rough wool and linen. Both are earth-toned because dyes are expensive, and both have been mended so many times they're more patched than original garment. The chest also contains your valuable possessions, and I use that term loosely. Some fishing line, hooks you've made from bone and scrap metal, a whetstone for your knife, maybe a wooden comb with half its teeth missing. If you're particularly prosperous, you might have a small religious icon or a battered cup that's just yours. These items represent your entire net worth beyond your shared ownership in the fishing boat. Speaking of shared ownership, you don't even own your boat outright. You're part of a cooperative arrangement with 3 other families, which means the profits get divided 4 ways. But also the maintenance costs get divided 4 ways, which is the only reason you can afford to fish at all. The boat is older than you are, has been repaired more times than anyone can count, and has a name like God's Grace or St. Peter's Hope because medieval people were really into hedging their bets with divine intervention. You're stumbling around in the darkness now, trying to find your clothes. There's no candle burning because tallow candles are expensive and you're saving those for when you actually need light to do something complex, like mending nets. The only illumination is the faint glow of embers in the hearth and whatever weak dawn light is starting to seep through the gaps in your walls. Your day clothes are basically your night clothes because sleeping naked in a medieval cottage is a recipe for hypothermia. You're wearing a long linen undershirt that's yellow with age and sweat. It was probably white once, maybe a decade ago, and you're pulling on your woolen tunic over it. The tunic is brown. Everything is brown. Your pants, technically called brays, are also brown and tied at the waist with a cord. You're wrapping your legs with wool strips called leg bindings because socks haven't really been invented yet in any practical sense, and you're shoving your feet into leather shoes that are less shoes and more pieces of leather vaguely shaped like feet and tied on with string. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants wore anything like underwear in the modern sense, but you've got your linen brays under your outer clothes, which serve that function while also being the only barrier between your skin and your scratchy wool outer layers. The whole outfit is designed for function. It's warm when wet, which is important because you're going to be wet, and it's cheap to make and repair. Your spouse is moving around too, getting the fire going, and you can hear the kids starting to stir on their section of the sleeping platform. There's no privacy in this arrangement. Everyone sees everyone else dress, undress, use the chamber pot, which is just a wooden bucket, argue, cry, everything. Medieval childhood meant learning very early that personal boundaries were a luxury no one could afford. The fire's crackling now, and your spouse is pulling out the breakfast supplies. This is going to be grim. You're not expecting bacon and eggs harry, expecting the same thing you eat for basically every meal, bread and ale. The bread is dark, dense, and contains more than just wheat flour. There's rye, barley, maybe some ground beans or peas mixed in to stretch the flour further. It was baked communally in the village oven several days ago because individual ovens are for rich people, and now it's hard enough to use as a weapon. You watch as your spouse uses a knife to saw off chunks of this bread rock. There's no butter, no jam, no cream cheese, just bread. Pure, unadorned, medieval bread that tastes like slightly sour grain and has the texture of compressed sawdust. You're going to soak yours in ale to make it edible, which is the standard breakfast technique. The ale is in a wooden cask in the corner, and it's the weak, small ale that everyone drinks, including children, because the water is genuinely dangerous. The local stream is downstream from other villages, which means it's carrying everyone else's waste. The well water is better, but wells can get contaminated, and there's no way to know until someone gets sick. Even weak ale has been boiled during brewing, which kills most of the nasty stuff. So you drink it for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and in between. You're mildly buzzed approximately 100% of your waking hours, but so is everyone else, so it's fine. The ale tastes like, well, it tastes like someone's college brewing experiment went wrong, but everyone's drinking it anyway because the alternative is cholera. It's flat, slightly sweet, vaguely bread-flavored, and it's your primary source of calories next to the bread. Some villages brew better ale than others, and there's a woman 2 cottages down who's known for making ale that doesn't taste like despair, but you can't afford her premium product. Your breakfast ale is brought to you by your spouse, whose brewing skills are adequate. It's drinkable. It won't kill you today, probably. You're dunking your bread in it, letting the hard crust soften just enough that you can bite through it without losing a tooth. Medieval dental health is surprisingly okay compared to later periods. No refined sugar helps, but you're still dealing with wear and tear from gritty flour that contains bits of the millstone it was ground on. The kids are eating too, quietly, because loud children in the morning get swatted. There's no concept of a leisurely family breakfast with conversation and laughter. Everyone's focused on getting calories in before the work starts. Your oldest, maybe 8 years old, will be coming with you on the boat today. This is how fishing families work. Children start learning the trade as soon as they're strong enough to not fall overboard, which is approximately age 7 or 8. Child labor laws won't exist for another 6 centuries, so enjoy that modern privilege next time you complain about your teenager's homework. You're chewing this bread, washing it down with ale, and contemplating the day ahead. The weather outside sounds miserable. You can hear wind and rain, which means rough seas. Rough seas mean dangerous work, but also fish move in rough weather, so potentially good catches. You don't get to choose whether to go out based on comfort. You go out based on whether you'll starve if you don't. There's a knock at your door, actually, more of a shove, because your door doesn't latch properly and people just kind of push it open. It's your boat partner, equally soggy, equally grim-faced, announcing that they're heading down to the harbor. Time to go. You haven't finished your bread, so you shove the rest in a small bag to eat later. Your spouse hands you a wooden flask of ale for the day. This is your packed lunch. Bread and ale, the same thing you had for breakfast, the same thing you'll have for dinner. You're heading for the door, and the smell hits you again, even stronger now. Someone's already dumping fresh fish waste in the street. The village is waking up, and with it comes the full sensory assault of a medieval fishing community. Smoke from hearths, rotting fish, human waste from the communal cesspit that's supposed to be cleaned regularly but isn't, wet wool, seaweed, and underneath it all, the salt smell of the ocean that would be pleasant if it weren't mixed with everything else. Your cottage door opens directly onto the village street, which is a generous term for what's essentially a muddy path between buildings. There's no pavement, no drainage, just churned up mud mixed with fish scales, seaweed, and things you're trying not to identify. You're walking toward the harbor, your leather shoes immediately soaked, and you're passing your neighbors doing the same. Everyone's hunched against the rain. Everyone looks exhausted, and it's not even 5 in the morning yet. Welcome to day 1 in your medieval fishing village. You haven't even gotten to the boat yet, and already you're wet, cold, underfed, and reconsidering every life choice that led to this moment. The church bells are still echoing across the village, calling people to early prayer, but you're heading to the harbor instead because God might watch over fishermen, but he doesn't pull the nets for them. The gray dawn is breaking over the ocean, revealing choppy water and a sky that promises more rain. Your boat is waiting. Your back already hurts, and you've got approximately 16 more hours of medieval survival ahead of you before you can collapse back onto that straw bed and do it all again tomorrow. Your stomach is already growling, which is unfortunate because you just ate breakfast. That rock-hard bread and ale combo provided maybe 400 calories, and you're about to burn through 3,000 in the next 12 hours of backbreaking labor. Medieval fishermen operate on a permanent calorie deficit, which explains why everyone in the village looks like they're made of rope and resentment. You're trudging toward the harbor, and your boat partner is explaining the day's plan. Apparently, you're heading to the usual fishing grounds about 3 miles offshore, which doesn't sound far until you remember you're rowing there in a wooden boat that predates your grandparents and has the structural integrity of a well-meaning basket. The wind is picking you can feel it cutting through your wool tunic like it's personally offended by your attempt to stay warm. The harbor is barely worthy of the name. It's more like a natural inlet where boats can be dragged onto the beach, protected somewhat by a rocky outcropping. There's no proper dock, no pier, just a muddy shoreline where boats rest on their sides during low tide and float at anchor during high tide. The tide is going out now, which means the boats are sitting at awkward angles, half in water, half on mud, and getting to them requires wading through cold seawater and slippery rocks. Your boat, remember, God's Grace, or whatever overly optimistic name it carries, is a clinker-built fishing vessel about 20 feet long. Clinker-built means the planks overlap like shingles, which is great for flexibility in rough seas, but also means there are approximately 600 places where water can seep in. The boat is made of oak, probably, or whatever wood was available when it was built sometime during your grandfather's youth. It's been patched, recaulked, and blessed by the village priest so many times that it's unclear whether it's held together by carpentry or faith. The design is simple, pointed at both ends, wider in the middle, with a single mast for a square sail and rowing benches for when the wind refuses to cooperate, which is often. There's no cabin, no shelter, no bathroom, just an open boat where you're completely exposed to weather, waves, and the general hostility of the North Sea. You're wading into the water now, and Holy Mother of God, it's cold. This isn't the refreshing cold of a modern swimming pool. This is the kind of cold that makes your bones ache and your brain momentarily forget how to form words. The water is probably around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which doesn't sound terrible until you remember you're wearing wool clothing that's now absorbing water like an extremely inefficient sponge. Wet wool weighs approximately the same as a dead horse and has similar warming properties. Your shoes are full of water, squelching with each step. You're trying to keep your balance on the slippery rocks while also dragging yourself toward the boat, which is bobbing in a way that seems almost mocking. Your boat partner is already aboard, having executed some kind of medieval parkour move that you're now expected to replicate. Here's the thing about boarding a small boat from the water. It requires core strength, upper body strength, coordination, and ideally, a complete absence of dignity. You're grabbing the side of the boat, the gunnel, if you want to be technical, and attempting to haul yourself up and over. The boat immediately tips toward you because physics is universal and also hates you personally. Water sloshes over the side. Your partner is yelling something helpful like, "Balance it," while doing nothing to actually help. You're half in, half out, with your stomach on the gunnel and your legs dangling in the water like some kind of undignified seal. Your wool tunic is bunched up around your chest. Your bag of bread has fallen into the bilge water at the bottom of the boat, and you're pretty sure you just kicked a hole in something important. With a final, graceless heave, you flop into the boat like a landed fish, which is ironic considering your profession. The boat's interior is about what you'd expect: wet, smelly, and littered with the detritus of fishing life. There's old rope everywhere, some of it coiled neatly, most of it just lying in tangles like maritime spaghetti. Fishing nets are piled in the middle section, reeking of previous catches. The smell is concentrated fish mixed with tar because the nets are treated with tar to preserve them, creating an aroma that can only be described as aggressive. The bottom of the boat has about 3 inches of water sloshing around, which is normal. This is the bilge water, a mixture of seawater that's seeped through those overlapping planks, rainwater, fish slime from yesterday's catch, and probably some substances you'd rather not analyze. Your bread bag is floating in it. You fish it out, pun absolutely intended, and the bread is now not just hard but also soggy and salty. Perfect. Your boat partner is already organizing the nets, and you're expected to help. These nets are not the light, synthetic fishing nets of the modern world. These are heavy hemp or flax nets, hand-woven, treated with tar and oil, and weighing roughly the same as a small teenager. They're also damp, which adds to the weight, and they're covered in fish scales from the last use because cleaning nets thoroughly is time-consuming and no one has time. Historians still argue whether medieval fishing nets were more efficient than ancient Roman designs. But sitting here in this boat, you're not particularly concerned with historical efficiency debates. You're concerned with the fact that your hands are already cold and you haven't even started the real work yet. The other 2 families in your boat cooperative are arriving now, wading through the water with the same graceless desperation you just demonstrated. There's Godric, who's maybe 50 but looks 70, with hands so gnarled from rope work that they're essentially permanent claws. His son William is with him, a teenager who's all elbows and attitude. They're boarding with slightly more skill than you managed, though William does drop an oar in the water and has to fish it out while his father mutters what are probably medieval curse words. The boat is crowded now. For grown men in a 20-foot boat, along with nets, ropes, oars, the mast, fishing lines, bait, and everyone's personal supplies. There's maybe 6 inches of personal space per person, and that's if everyone stays perfectly still, which won't happen. You're going to be climbing over each other all day, stepping on hands, bumping heads, and generally existing in a level of forced intimacy that would make a modern person require therapy. Godric is taking charge because he's the eldest and also owns the largest share of the boat. He's directing operations with the confidence of someone who's done this 10,000 times and survived, which is actually impressive given medieval fishing mortality rates. You're being told to handle the oars while they raise the sail, which sounds simple until you remember you've never actually rowed a boat before today in your hypothetical medieval life. The oars are massive. They're not the neat, balanced oars of a racing shelfiery long, heavy pieces of roughly shaped wood that fit into simple rope loops on the gunwale. There's no mechanical advantage, no fancy oar locks, just you versus physics. You're supposed to push the boat away from shore while the others get the sail situation sorted. You're pushing against the oar, feet braced against the bottom of the boatright in that bilge water. So now your shoes are even wetter and the boat is barely moving. The oar keeps slipping in its rope loop, threatening to fall into the water. You're pushing harder, your back muscles immediately protesting, and finally, the boat grudgingly moves about 2 feet. This is going to be a long day. William is now helping you, taking the other oar, and together you're managing to actually propel the boat away from shore. The rowing technique is simple in theory. Dip the oar in the water, pull it toward you, lift it out, return it forward. Repeat until either you reach your destination or your arms fall off. In practice, you and William are completely out of sync. You're pulling while he's returning, creating a zigzag pattern that's more drunken water snake than efficient maritime travel. Godric is yelling instructions about rhythm and timing, which would be helpful if you could hear him over the wind and waves. The wind is really picking up now, howling across the harbor and making the boat rock in ways that are activating your inner ear's emergency protocols. You're not seasick yet, but it's coming. You can feel it lurking in your stomach like a malevolent presence. The sail is going up now. The other partner whose name you're blanking on is hauling on ropes, and the square sail is unfurling. It's made of wool, because of course it is, and it's been treated with some kind of oil or fat to make it somewhat water resistant. The sail is patched in several places, with visible repairs in slightly different colored wool, giving it a patchwork appearance that would be charming if you weren't trusting your life to it. The wind catches the sail, and suddenly the boat lurches forward. You're no longer rowing, the wind is doing the work, and you're picking up speed in a way that would be exhilarating if it weren't terrifying. The boat is cutting through the water, spray flying up and over the bow, soaking everyone in a fine mist of cold seawater. Your wool clothes are now transitioning from damp to thoroughly soaked, and you're beginning to understand why medieval fishermen had life expectancies that made 30 seem ancient. You're leaving the harbor now, passing the rocky outcropping that provides some protection from the open sea. Once you're past it, the full force of the ocean hits. The waves are bigger out here, maybe 4 or 5 feet, and the boat is riding up and over them in a motion that's doing absolutely nothing positive for your stomach situation. The coastline is receding behind you, becoming a gray smudge of land punctuated by the village church tower. That church tower serves as a navigation aid. Actually, medieval fishermen navigate using landmarks, the position of the sun when it's visible, and mostly just intimate knowledge of local waters passed down through generations. There are no charts, no compasses, just Godric's assertion that the fishing grounds are that way while pointing at featureless ocean. Your stomach is definitely rebelling now. That bread and ale breakfast is threatening to make a return appearance. Seasickness in a medieval fishing boat is a special kind of misery because there's nowhere to go, nothing to do but suffer, and you're expected to keep working regardless. You're trying to focus on the horizon, which is a technique that won't be formally described by doctors for several centuries, but somehow works anyway. William is looking green too, which is mildly comforting. Misery loves company, especially medieval misery. Godric and the other partner seem unaffected, having apparently achieved some kind of immunity through decades of exposure. They're going about their business adjusting the sail, checking the nets while you and William are just trying not to vomit. The boat is creaking ominously. Every piece of wood is groaning under the stress of waves and wind, creating a symphony of sounds that suggest imminent structural failure. Water is definitely coming in through the planks. You can see it seeping in with each wave impact. This is normal, apparently. The other partner is already bailing with a wooden scoop, tossing bilge water over the side in a Sisyphean task that will continue all day. You're maybe 2 miles from shore now, and Godric is declaring this good enough. The sail is coming down, being bundled and tied. The nets are being prepared. This is if actual fishing is about to begin, and you're about to discover that hauling nets is where medieval fishing transitions from unpleasant to genuinely torturous. But first, you're going to vomit. There's no fighting it anymore. You're leaning over the side of the boat, and there goes your breakfast, returning to the sea in a spectacular display of human frailty. The bread and ale exit exactly as they entered, thoroughly unappetizing. William is doing the same on the other side of the boat, creating a synchronized vomiting performance that would be impressive if it weren't so pathetic. Godric doesn't even look sympathetic. This is normal. First-timers and young fishermen always get sick. You'll develop sea legs eventually, or you'll die. And either way, the problem resolves itself. He's tossing you a rag to wipe your mouth, which is more courtesy than you expected. Your mouth tastes like medieval ale and regret. Your stomach is empty but still churning. And the real work hasn't even started. The nets are ready. The fishing grounds are here. Wherever here is in this featureless expanse of gray water, and you're about to learn that the phrase, "a net full of fish," grossly undersells how heavy dead fish can be when you're hauling them up from ocean depths while standing in a rocking boat. Welcome to medieval commercial fishing. The romance of the sea, they said. The noble profession of feeding the village, they said. No one mentioned the vomiting, the cold, the wet wool, or the fact that your breakfast is currently feeding some very confused fish about 20 yards from the boat. The nets are going over the side now, and you're expected to help, which is problematic given that your arms feel like overcooked noodles and your stomach is still doing gymnastics. Godric is barking instructions about feeding the net out slowly, not letting it tangle, watching for the float markers, and approximately 17 other things you're supposed to remember while also not falling overboard. The net itself is a marvel of medieval engineering and also an instrument of personal torture. It's a gill net, designed to catch fish by their gills as they try to swim through the mesh. The principle is simple. Fish swim in. Fish can't swim out. Fish become your property and eventually your dinner. The execution is considerably more complex, involving about 200 feet of tarred hemp net weighted at the bottom with stones and pieces of lead, and floated at the top with cork or inflated fish bladders. Yes, fish bladders. Medieval fishermen discovered that the swim bladders of previously caught fish, when dried and sealed, make excellent floats. So you're literally using dead fish parts to catch more fish, which is efficient but also deeply unsettling when you think about it too hard. The bladders are bobbing along the top of the net as it unfurls, looking like grotesque little balloons advertising your location to any fish with survival instincts. You're feeding the net over the side, hand over hand, and it's heavier than you anticipated. The wet hemp weighs roughly the same as your entire body, and you're expected to control its descent into the water while the boat rocks and pitches. The net keeps trying to tangle hemp rope's natural state is apparently chaotic knot, and every few seconds you have to stop and untangle a section while Godric makes increasingly exasperated noises. William is on the other side doing the same, and he's marginally better at this than you are, which is humiliating considering he's 14 and looks like a strong breeze could snap him in half. Youth and experience are beating your theoretical adult strength. which tells you everything about how unprepared you are for medieval manual labor. The net is finally in the water, stretched out in a long line marked by those disturbing fish bladder floats. Now comes the waiting part. You're going to drift here for a few hours while fish hopefully swim into your net and entangle themselves. This sounds like a break, maybe a chance to rest. But medieval fishing boats don't really do rest. There's always something to maintain, repair, or worry about. Godric is already inspecting the boats, caulking the tar and moss mixture stuffed between planks to keep water out. It's failing in several places, which he's addressing by jamming more moss into gaps while muttering about needing to properly recaulk the whole boat, which requires beaching it and several days of work that no one has time for. The other partner, whose name you've learned is John, is checking the oars for cracks and testing the mast stability. You're being handed a wooden baler and told to get to work on the bilge water, which has increased from 3 inches to about 5 inches while you were distracted by net deployment drama. Bailing a medieval boat is exactly as fun as it sounds. You're crouching in water, scooping it up with a wooden bowl, and throwing it over the side, only to have wave spray immediately replace half of what you just removed. The technique is simple but exhausting. Scoop, stand, throw, crouch, repeat. Your back is bent at an angle that chiropractors won't exist to fix for another 7 centuries. Water sloshes around your feet with each scoop, and you're discovering that medieval boat water is not just seawater, it's seawater plus fish slime, plus tar residue, plus whatever mysterious substances have accumulated in the bilge over the boat's lifetime. Your hands are already developing blisters. The wooden baler's handle is rough, unfinished, and rubbing against skin that's softened from being perpetually wet. You can feel the hot spots forming, those pre-blister warnings that you're damaging tissue. By the end of the day, these will be full blisters. By the end of the week, they'll be calluses. By the end of the month, your hands will look like Godric's, rough, scarred, and about as sensitive as leather gloves. William has pulled out fishing lines while you're bailing. These are hand lines, simple affairs consisting of a length of hemp cord, a bone hook, and whatever bait you've brought. Today's bait appears to be chunks of fish from yesterday's catch, which have been sitting in someone's cottage overnight and now smell like death's vacation home. The fish chunks are gray, slimy, and falling apart as William tries to impale them on hooks. Historians still argue whether medieval fishermen used artificial lures or only natural bait. But sitting here watching William struggle with disintegrating fish chunks, you're pretty sure artificial lures would be an improvement. The bait is barely staying on the hook, and when it does, it hangs there like a sad, smelly flag announcing to fish everywhere that this is definitely a trap. The lines are going over the side now, weighted with stones to sink them to the right depth. There's no reel, no mechanical advantage, just hand-line fishing, where you hold the cord and feel for the telltale tug of a fish taking the bait. William is playing out line, counting under his breath to estimate depth. 60 pulls apparently equals the right depth, which is medieval precision measurement at its finest. You're still bailing, but you're also watching the process because you'll be expected to do this yourself soon. The line is wrapped around a wooden frame that serves as a primitive reel, allowing you to store line without it tangling into impossible knots. William's hands are moving automatically, the muscle memory of someone who's been doing this since he could walk. He's not even looking at the line, he's watching the water, reading currents and waves in ways you can't begin to understand. The boat is drifting now, moved by current and wind. There's no anchoring in deep water with medieval technology is impractical, so you're just floating, following the fish bladder markers of your net. The coastline is a distant smudge. The church tower is barely visible. You're in that uniquely unsettling maritime space where land is too far to swim to but close enough to see, meaning if something goes wrong, you'll die within sight of home. John is passing around food. It's mid-morning, maybe 8 am, and apparently, It's time for a snack. The food is oatcakes, which sounds better than it is. These are dense, dry rounds of cooked oats, probably made days ago, hard as stones and about as flavorful. You're expected to eat one while continuing to bail, which is a multitasking challenge that medieval fishermen apparently master or starve. The oatcake tastes like compressed sadness. There's no salt, no butter, no seasoning of any kind, just oats that were mixed with water and cooked over a fire until they achieved rock-like consistency. You're trying to bite off a chunk, but it's resisting your teeth like it has a personal vendetta. Eventually, you manage to break off a piece, which sits in your mouth like a dry sponge, absorbing all available saliva. William hands you a flask of ale, the universal medieval solvent for making terrible food edible. You're washing down the oatcake, feeling it scrape down your throat like edible sandpaper. The ale is the same weak stuff from breakfast, but right now it tastes like salvation. You're taking several long pulls, rehydrating and mildly alcoholizing yourself for the work ahead. Godric is checking the net now, pulling up the line to see if anything's been caught yet. It's too early, probably, but he's impatient or bored or just going through the motions. The net is coming up, hand over hand, dripping seawater and looking disappointingly empty. No fish yet. This is fine. Apparently, fishing requires patience, which is medieval speak for you're going to sit in this cold, wet boat for hours and possibly catch nothing. The wind is shifting, and suddenly the boat is rocking differently. The waves are coming from a new angle, hitting the side of the boat rather than the bow, and the rolling motion is intensifying. Your barely settled stomach is taking notice. The oatcake, which was sitting uneasily in your gut, is now actively considering a return journey. You're gripping the bailer tighter, trying to focus on the work, but the rolling is getting worse. The boat is tilting maybe 20 degrees to each side, which doesn't sound like much until you're experiencing it while crouched in bilge water trying not to vomit. Water is sloshing from side to side, creating a miniature tidal pattern inside the boat. Supplies are sliding around rope coils, the spare or someone's bag of personal items, all drifting back and forth with each roll. John is adjusting something with the net, trying to reposition it for the new current, and he's moving around the boat with the casual confidence of someone who's forgotten that normal people need to hold on to things. He's just walking, balancing with the rolls, completely unbothered while you're white-knuckling a wooden bailer and praying to every saint you can remember. William's line jerks suddenly. He's got something. His hands are moving fast, pulling in line, and you can see the excitement even in his normally sullen teenager face. The line is coming up, hand over hand, and whatever's on the other end is fighting. The cord is cutting into William's hands, not wearing gloves because gloves are for people with money, and you can see his face tighten with effort. The fish breaks the surface, and it's a fish. You're not sure what kind. It's silver, maybe a foot long, flopping and twisting on the line. William is hauling it up to the gunwale, trying to swing it into the boat, but the fish has opinions about this plan. It's thrashing violently, spraying water, and the hook is embedded somewhere in its jaw or gills. With a final heave, William gets the fish over the gunwale and into the boat, where it immediately begins its death throes. The fish is flopping in the bilge water, smacking against the boat's ribs with wet thuds, fighting for life in an environment where it has absolutely no chance. Its mouth is opening and closing, gills working uselessly in air, eyes wide and uncomprehending. This is the part they don't show in romantic paintings of medieval fishing. The actual death. The fish is suffocating, drowning in air, and it takes minutes. Long, unpleasant minutes where you're watching a living thing struggle and fail. William is trying to kill it faster. There's a wooden club specifically for this purpose, and he's hitting the fish on the head with varying degrees of success. The first hit stuns it. The second makes it flop harder. The third finally does the job. And the fish goes still. Blood is mixing with the bilge water now, creating pink swirls that slosh around your feet. Fish blood has a specific smell, metallic, oceanic, and weirdly sweet, and it's adding to the olfactory assault you're already experiencing. The dead fish is lying in the water, eyes glazed, and William is already rebaiting his hook with another chunk of decomposing fish to catch another. This is the reality of fishing. Killing things, repeatedly, all day, until you've killed enough things to make the trip economically viable. It's not sporting. It's not noble. It's just systematic harvesting of ocean life using methods that would make a modern fisherman weep for how inefficient they are. Godric is checking the net again, and this time there's something in it. Several somethings. You can see the net straining as he pulls it up, and there's definite weight. Fish have swum into the gill net and gotten stuck exactly as designed. Godric is calling for help, and suddenly everyone's abandoning their tasks to haul the net. This is it. This is the big effort. The reason you're out here freezing and vomiting. You're grabbing the wet hemp net, adding your strength to the collective pull, and it's incredibly heavy. The net is loaded with fish, maybe 20 or 30 pounds of them, all tangled in the mesh and adding their weight to the already heavy hemp. You're pulling hand over hand, trying to coordinate with the others, and it's like a medieval tug-of-war where the opposing team is gravity and ocean water. The net is coming up inch by inch. The fish bladder floats appearing first, then the top line of the net, and finally the actual catch section where fish are caught by their gills, mouths open, some still weakly struggling. The catch is mixed several herring, couple of cod, some fish you don't recognize, all silver and dead or dying in the mesh. Godric is grunting with approval. This is a decent haul. Apparently. Not great, but decent. The net is coming over the gunnel now, and fish are being dumped into the boat with wet, slapping sounds. Now comes the untangling. Fish caught in gill nets don't just slide out, they're restuck, with mesh embedded in their gills, sometimes wrapped around their bodies. You have to manually remove each fish, which means handling cold, slimy, dead or dying sea creatures while trying to preserve the net's integrity. You're reaching for your first fish, and it's unpleasant. The scales are rough against your already raw hands. The fish is cold, much colder than the air, and slimy with a coating that feels like someone sneezed but in fish form. You're trying to untangle it from the net, but the mesh is tight around its gills, and you're having to tear some gill tissue to free it. The fish comes free with a ripping sound, leaving bits of its gills in the net. It's definitely dead now if it wasn't before. You're tossing it into the growing pile of fish in the boat center, and reaching for the next one, and then the next one, until your hands are covered in fish slime and fish blood and probably fish diseases that medieval medicine has no name for. This is fishing. Not the peaceful image of sitting by a pond with a rod. Not the romantic notion of noble seafolk. This is systematic, messy, cold, wet death dealing for marginal economic gain. And you've got hours of this ahead. The pile of fish in the boat center is growing, and with it comes the realization that you're now sitting in what essentially amounts to a floating fish morgue. Dead and dying fish are everywhere under your feet, sliding against your legs with each rock of the boat, occasionally flopping with residual nerve impulses that make you jump every single time because your brain hasn't fully accepted that you're now living in a fish nightmare. The smell is evolving too. Fresh fish has a clean, oceanic scent when it's truly fresh-like, still in the ocean fresh. But fish that's been dead for even 15 minutes starts developing a different character. It's still oceanic, but with undertones of something sharper, more biological. The fish are releasing various fluids, blood, obviously, but also digestive contents, reproductive fluids if you caught them at the wrong time of year, and just general fish liquids that seem designed to make everything they touch disgusting. Your hands are absolutely destroyed. The combination of cold water, rough hemp rope, fish slime, and constant friction has turned them into raw, pink disasters. Every finger has at least one blister forming or already formed and burst. The salt water stings every tiny cut and abrasion. Your palms are developing that wrinkled, oversaturated look that happens when skin's been wet too long. Except it's worse because it's not just water, it's fish water. Godric is declaring the net needs to go back out. One decent haul is nice, but you need more to make the trip worthwhile. Medieval fishing economics are brutal. You've got to catch enough fish to feed your family, pay your portion of the boat maintenance, give the required tithe to the church, pay taxes to the Lord who technically owns these fishing rights, and maybe, if you're lucky, have something left to sell at market for actual money. The net is going over the side again, and you're helping despite the fact that your hands are screaming in protest. The rough hemp is abrading your fresh blisters, creating new levels of pain you didn't think possible. William notices you wincing and tosses you a rag knot to wrap your hands. That would be impractical, but to give you something to grip the net with. It helps marginally, which is the best you can hope for in medieval working conditions. The boat is drifting again, following currents that Godric seems to understand through some combination of experience and maritime witchcraft. The coastline is even hazier, maybe 4 miles out, which is terrifying when you remember that your swimming ability is adequate in calm water, and these are definitely not calm waters. Medieval fishermen frequently drowned within sight of shore, and now you understand why. The ocean doesn't care how close land is. Water is water, and you can drown in all of it. John is organizing the catch, sorting fish by type and size. The herring go in one pile, theory, the bread and butter of medieval fishing. Small but numerous and relatively easy to preserve. The cod go in another pile, theory, more valuable, especially the larger ones, because cod salts and dries beautifully and can be traded far inland. There's also some whiting, a couple of flatfish that might be plaice, and something that looks vaguely demonic with spines and a face only a marine biologist could love. The sorting is important because different fish get processed differently. Herring will be gutted and packed in salt or smoked. Cod will be split, salted, and dried on racks back in the village. The flatfish will probably be eaten fresh because they don't preserve as well. And that spiny demon fish? John tosses it overboard. Not worth the effort. Apparently, medieval fishing is surprisingly selective. Not because of conservation concerns, but because storage space and preservation materials are limited. You're being handed a knife and shown how to gut fish. The technique is straightforward. Insert the knife in the fish's vent, slice forward toward the head, scoop out the guts, toss them overboard. Simple in theory, messy in practice. The knife you're given is, well, calling it dull would be generous. It's a piece of iron beaten into a blade shape, with an edge that couldn't cut butter with aggressive intent. Your first herring is lying in your lap because there's nowhere else to put it and you're attempting the gutting process. The knife is barely penetrating the fish's skin. You're sawing rather than slicing, and the fish is sliding around on your wet wool pants, making the whole operation feel like trying to perform surgery on a greased watermelon while riding a roller coaster. Finally, the knife breaks through, and you're slicing forward. Fish guts are spilling onto your lap, intestines, stomach contents, and various organs you can't identify and don't want to. The smell is immediate and overwhelming. Fish guts don't smell like fresh fish. They smell like concentrated ocean decay mixed with whatever the fish ate recently, which appears to have been smaller fish and possibly some rotting seaweed. You're scooping out the guts with your fingers because that's the most efficient method, and they're cold and slimy and falling apart in your hands. Some of the intestines are still intact. Some are rupturing and releasing their contents, and you're trying very hard not to think about the fact that you're elbow deep in fish organs while your own breakfast is still a recent memory of vomit. The gutted fish gets tossed into another pile, and you're reaching for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. This is your life now. An endless cycle of grabbing slimy fish, sawing them open with a dull knife, scooping out their internal organs, and repeating until either the fish run out or you lose your mind. William is doing the same next to you, working twice as fast with half the fumbling, which continues to be humiliating. The fish guts are accumulating in the bilge water, creating a chunky soup at your feet. Technically, you're supposed to throw them overboard, but in the rhythm of gutting, it's easier to just drop them and deal with the cleanup later. So now you're standing well, crouching in water that contains seawater, tar residue, fish blood, and now fish organs. Your shoes, already soaked, are now marinating in this biological stew. A wave hits the boat broadside, bigger than the others, and everything shifts. The sorted fish piles slide across the boat. The ungutted fish scatter. Your knife goes skittering across the wet planks and nearly goes overboard before John catches it with his foot. You're grabbing for the gunnel, trying to stay upright, and fish are slapping against your legs like a school of dead, slimy zombies seeking revenge. Godric is laughing. Actually laughing. This is apparently hilarious to someone who's experienced it 1,000 times. William is scrambling to resort the fish, his teenage dignity thoroughly destroyed by the indignity of chasing dead herring around a boat. You're just trying to relocate your knife and your composure, in that order. The net is being checked again, and there's another haul. Not as good as the first, maybe a dozen fish this time, but every fish counts toward making this trip worthwhile. You're back to hauling, hand over hand, your blistered palms screaming, your back complaining, and your overall existence questioning what series of life choices led to this moment. This catch includes an eel, which Godric is unreasonably excited about. Eels are valuable, theory-rich, oily, and considered a delicacy by people who have money. This one is maybe 2 feet long, dark and slippery, and it's not dead. Eels are apparently hard to kill and even harder to hold onto. John is wrestling with it, trying to get a grip on its slimy body, and the eel is having none of it. The eel is writhing with surprising strength, slipping through John's hands, and suddenly it's loose in the boat. A live eel in a confined space is apparently everyone's problem. It's thrashing in the bilge water, smacking against the boat's ribs, and somehow managing to be everywhere at once. William is trying to corner it with an oar. Godric is attempting to grab it with the fish club. You're just trying to get your feet out of the way. After what feels like 10 minutes but is probably 2, John finally pins the eel against the boat's side and delivers a killing blow with a knife through its head. The eel goes limp, finally defeated, and John is holding it up like a trophy. This eel will bring good money at market, assuming you make it back to shore, which is starting to feel like an optimistic assumption. The sky is darkening. Not evening dark, it's only midday but storm dark. Clouds are rolling in from the west, thick and gray and moving fast. Godric notices and his expression shifts from pleased about the eel to concerned about meteorology. Medieval fishermen don't have weather forecasts. They have looking at the sky and hoping. The wind is picking up too, shifting direction again, and the waves are building. What were 4-foot swells are becoming 6-foot swells, and the boat is riding them like a particularly unhappy amusement park ride. You're starting to understand why fishing villages have so many widows. The ocean is beautiful from shore, but out here, it's actively hostile. Godric is making a decision. The nets are coming, U-Paul of them. Now, quickly. This isn't a leisurely, let's check the catch haul. This is a get everything in the boat because we're leaving haul. Everyone is pulling, fighting the weight of the nets and the increasing wave action. Your hands have progressed past pain into a weird numbness, which is either good or very bad. The nets are in, fish and all, piled haphazardly in the boat. There's no time for careful sorting now. Godric is directing the sail deployment, and you're being pulled off fish duty to help with the mast. The mast on a medieval fishing boat isn't permanently installed, it's a removable pole that fits into a step. A wooden socket in the boat's bottom. Right now, it's lying along the boat's length, and you need to lift it upright and secure it. The mast is heavy solid oak, maybe 15 feet talon slippery with spray. You and William are on one side, Godric and John on the other, and you're trying to walk it upright while the boat pitches. The mast is wobbling, threatening to fall to either side, and if it goes overboard, you're rowing home, which in these waves would be essentially impossible. With a coordinated effort that feels more like luck than skill, the mast slides into its step and locks into place. The sail is being hauled up the mast on rope lines, and the wet wool is heavy and uncooperative. It's catching on itself, tangling, and requiring constant adjustment. Godric is swearing actual medieval curses that are probably blasphemous and yanking on lines with the frustration of someone who's done this in perfect conditions 1,000 times and in terrible conditions at least 100. The sail finally unfurls, catches wind, and the boat lurches forward violently. You're nearly thrown off your feet. William actually does fall, landing in the fish and gut soup that's sloshing around the bilge. The boat is heeling over, tilting to one side as the wind pushes against the sail and water is coming over the low side gunwale. You're sailing now, racing toward shore, and it's terrifying. The boat is moving faster than it did on the way out, pushed by wind and also by Godric's urgent desire to not die today. Waves are hitting the bow and exploding into spray that soaks everyone. The fish are sliding around again, and you're trying to wedge yourself against the boat's ribs to avoid being thrown overboard. The rain starts. Of course it does. Cold, hard rain that feels like tiny frozen needles hitting your face. Visibility drops immediately. You can barely see the bow of your own boat, let alone the coastline. Godric is navigating by instinct and faith, pointing the boat toward where he believes shore is, and hoping he's right. You're bailing again, because the water situation in the boat has gone from concerning to actively dangerous. Rain is adding to the bilge, waves are adding to it, and the boat is sitting lower in the water than it was an hour ago. You're scooping and throwing, in a rhythm that's become automatic. Your arms are burning, your back is locked in a permanent bend, but you keep bailing because the alternative is sinking. William is on the other side with another bailer, working just as frantically. John is adjusting the sail, trying to maximize speed without tipping the boat completely over. Godric is steering with the steering oar, long paddle mounted on the boat's side, fighting to keep the boat pointed toward home. The church tower appears through the rain like a salvation mirage. You're close to shore, maybe a mile out, and the sight of that tower means you might actually survive this. The waves are worse here in the shallower water, the re steeper, meaner, breaking with white caps that threaten to swamp the boat. Godric is shouting instructions about dropping the sail. You need to slow down before you hit the beach, or the boat will smash into rocks and shatter. The sail is coming down, requiring everyone to stop their current crisis management and handle new crisis management. The wet wool is fighting you, wrapping around the mast, tangling in lines, and generally being as difficult as possible. The sail is finally down and bundled, and now you're rowing, in 6-foot waves, in driving rain, with hands that are raw meat. The oars are out, and you're pulling with everything you have, trying to match William's rhythm, trying to drive the boat toward the harbor entrance. You can see the rocky outcropping now, the one that marks the harbor. Godric is steering toward it, trying to time the waves, and you're rowing with mechanical desperation. The boat crests a wave, and for a moment, you can see the whole village, cottages, the church, people on shore, and then you're in the trough and seeing nothing but water walls on either side. One more wave, one more pull on the oars, The harbor entrance is there, and you're through it, into the relatively calm water of the protected inlet. The rowing gets easier immediately. The waves diminish, and suddenly, impossibly, you're gliding toward the beach where you launched approximately 8 hours ago. The boat grinds onto the muddy shore with a scraping sound that's either the boat's hull or your last nerve giving out. You're here. You're alive. The trip is over, and you've got a boat full of dead fish to process before this day is done. The boat is beached, sitting at an angle in the mud, and you're expected to immediately start unloading. There's no break, no moment to sit and process the fact that you nearly died several times in the last hour. Medieval fishing operates on the principle that fish rot quickly, so everything happens now, regardless of how exhausted you are or how much your hands resemble tenderized meat. You're climbing out of the boat, which is somehow harder than climbing in was. Your legs have been locked in a crouched position for 8 hours. Your muscles are trembling from exhaustion, and your feet are numb blocks of ice inside your waterlogged shoes. You're stepping into the shallows, and the cold water that felt shocking this morning now barely registers because you're already so thoroughly soaked and miserable that additional wetness is just background noise. Other fishermen are arriving. 2 boats are beaching all along the harbor, everyone racing the weather and the fish rot clock. The beach is transforming into organized chaos. Men shouting, fish flying through the air from boat to shore, nets being dragged out and spread for later repair. The whole village economy is activating around the day's catch, and you're just one exhausted cog in this medieval fish processing machine. Your fish are being hauled out of the boat in baskets, woven willow baskets that leak water and fish slime through their gaps. You're carrying one now, maybe 40 pounds of dead herring, and your arms are shaking with the effort. The basket's handles are cutting into your destroyed palms, and you can feel at least one blister burst and start bleeding, though honestly it's hard to distinguish blood from the general wetness at this point. The processing area is set up right on the beach, a series of rough wooden tables made from planks laid across barrels. This is where the real work begins, where fish transform from things you caught to things people can actually eat or sell. Women from the village are already at the tables. This is their domain. Fishing might be men's work, but fish processing is decidedly women's work, which means your spouse is probably here somewhere, ready to inherit your disgusting catch. You spot your spouse at one of the tables, already elbow deep in fish guts from someone else's catch. They look up, see you approaching with your basket, and their expression is the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's been gutting fish for 3 hours and has at least 6 more hours to go. There's no cheerful greeting, no welcome back from the sea, just a nod of acknowledgement and a gesture toward an empty spot on the table. You're dumping your basket of herring onto the table, and your spouse is already sorting them. The process has a rhythm. Select fish, gut with a practiced slice, scrape out internals, toss into the gutted pile. Repeat. Your spouse's hands move with automatic efficiency. The knife work precise despite the repetitive nature. You've been out risking your life for these fish. Your spouse will spend the rest of the day processing them. Medieval marriage is nothing if not a partnership of mutual suffering. The women at the processing tables are talking. This is the village's social hub, where gossip flows as freely as fish guts. You're catching snippets of conversation. Someone's daughter might be pregnant out of wedlock. The baker's wife was seen talking to a stranger. The Lord's tax collector is coming next week, and everyone's terrified about what new fees he'll invent. This is how information spreads in a medieval village. Not through newspapers or town criers, but through women processing fish and men drinking ale. You're being sent back to the boat for more fish. Godric wants everything unloaded now, sorted and ready for processing. You're trudging back through the mud, your legs barely cooperating, and finding William already loading another basket. The boy looks dead on his feet, pale, shaking, soaked through, but he's still working because stopping isn't an option when your family's winter survival depends on today's catch. Together, you're hauling baskets from boat to processing tables, again and again. Each trip is a small eternity of pain. Lift the basket, walk through mud that sucks at your shoes, climb the slight incline to the processing area, dump the fish, return for more. Your back is screaming. Your shoulders are on fire. Your hands have progressed past bleeding into a state where you've just accepted they're permanently damaged now. The cod are getting special treatment theory too valuable to just dump with the herring. Godric is personally carrying them to a separate table where a specialist is waiting. This is old Margaret, who's been splitting and salting cod for longer than anyone can remember. She's maybe 60, which in medieval terms makes her ancient, and her hands are so scarred and calloused they look like they're made of leather. Old Margaret's cod-splitting technique is mesmerizing in a horrifying way. She takes a cod, lays it belly up, and with one practiced motion slices from vent to throat, opening the fish completely. Another slice removes the head. Her hands plunge into the cavity, ripping out guts and spine in one smooth pull. The backbone comes out almost clean, leaving behind two connected fillets. The whole process takes maybe 15 seconds per fish. The split cod are being laid out on a nearby table and absolutely buried in salt. Not a light dusting, these fish are being mummified in salt, packed so thoroughly that they're more salt than fish. This is how you preserve cod for months. Extract all the moisture through salt cure, then dry them on racks until they're hard as boards. Properly prepared salt cod can last a year and travel hundreds of miles, which is why it's so valuable. Your cod might end up in a monastery in France or a merchant's house in London, feeding people who've never seen the ocean. That valuable eel from earlier is causing excitement. The fish merchantman who travels between villages buying catches has appeared and is negotiating with Godric. You can't hear the conversation, but you can read the body language. Godric wants more money. The merchant is offering less. Both are posturing like this negotiation isn't a predetermined dance they do every week. The merchant wins, as merchants always do. He's got the money and the connections to markets. Godric has fish that will rot if not sold. Medieval economics aren't subtle. The eel goes into the merchant's special basket. It's got several fish from different boats already in coins change hands. Actual silver coins, which you see rarely enough that their presence is noteworthy. Your share of that eel money will be roughly 1/4 of whatever Godric negotiated, minus boat expenses, minus the church tithe, minus administrative costs that Godric will explain vaguely, and you'll accept because confronting the elder fisherman isn't worth the social consequences. You're estimating maybe enough coin to buy a new knife. If you're lucky, the knife you use today is Godric's anyway, so a personal knife would be a legitimate upgrade. The herring processing is accelerating. Your spouse and the other women are working faster now. TVE found their rhythm, and fish are being gutted at impressive speed. The guts are being tossed into buckets, which confused you until you remember that fish waste isn't waste in a medieval village. Those guts will be used, some for bait, some for fertilizer in the village's meager gardens, some possibly for the tanner who uses fish oil in leather processing. Nothing is wasted when you're living this close to subsistence. The gulls have arrived, scores of them, screaming and diving, fighting over discarded fish parts. They're aggressive, these coastal gulls, with no fear of humans. One swoops close to your head, and you instinctively duck, which sends pain shooting through your locked back muscles. The gulls don't care about your pain. They're dinosaur descendants with wings and an attitude, and this fish processing beach is their buffet. You're being handed a bucket of gutted herring and directed toward the smoking shed. This is a separate structure near the beach, basically a large wooden shed with a fire pit inside and racks above it. Herring can be salted like cod, but smoking is faster and produces a product that's ready to eat sooner. Smoked herring will feed your family this week, while the salted fish cure for winter storage. The smoking shed is already operating at full capacity. A fire of green wood, specifically alder, which gives good flavorous, producing thick, fragrant smoke. Herring are hanging from racks by the dozens, already starting to turn golden brown. The smoke is intense inside the shed, making your eyes water and your throat burn. The woman tending the fire, another village specialist, barely seems to notice. She's probably been breathing smoke for so many years that her lungs have just accepted this as normal. You're hanging your herring on empty hooks, spearing them through the gills and spacing them so smoke can circulate. The fish are still slightly warm from recent life, and they're slippery, and the hooks are at awkward heights that require stretching and bending. Your back protests every movement, but the herring keep going up because smoked fish means food, means survival. Historians still argue whether medieval smoking techniques produced better or worse flavor than modern methods. But standing here in the smoke, you're not contemplating culinary nuances. You're just trying to hang fish without dropping them or passing out from smoke inhalation. Back outside, back to the processing tables. More fish are arriving from other boats. The beach is a scene of controlled mayhem. Fish everywhere, people everywhere, gulls screaming, the smell of guts and salt and smoke mixing into an aroma that defines the village's entire existence. This is what a medieval fishing village looks like at peak operation, and it's glorious in its efficiency and horrifying in its sensory assault. Your spouse catches your eye and gestures toward a different basket. These are the fish you're keeping for your family. Maybe a dozen herring, smaller than the ones going to market, but still good eating. These will be your meals for the next few days. Fish for breakfast with bread. Fish for dinner with more bread. Maybe fish soup if you're feeling fancy and someone has vegetables to spare. The flatfish from earlier, those place or whatever they were, are being sold fresh to villagers who have coin. Fresh fish is a luxury in a fishing village, which seems ironic, but preservation takes priority over immediate consumption. If you don't salt, smoke, or dry your catch, you're rich today and starving in winter. So the fresh fish go to the priest, the reeve, the better-off families who can afford the premium of eating fish that hasn't been cured into leather. The sun is lower. No, it's late afternoon. Maybe 4 or 5 p.m. and the processing is finally winding down. The tables are covered in fish scales and slime, creating a surface that's treacherous and disgusting. The buckets of fish guts are being hauled away for various purposes. The baskets are being rinsed in seawater, which barely cleans them but at least removes the bulk of the slime. Godric is doing accounting, such as it is. He's got a tally stick, a piece of wood with notches representing fish counts and values, and he's calculating shares. Your boat's total catch: approximately 200 herring, 15 cod, that one valuable eel, and some miscellaneous fish, minus the church tie that hats 10% right off the top. So 20 herring and 2 cod go to God's representative on earth. Minus boat maintenance fund another 10%, because the boat needs constant repairs. Minus the merchant's cut for the fish he bought. What's left gets divided 4 ways among the boat partners. You're getting maybe 35 herring, 3 cod, and a handful of miscellaneous fish. This has to feed your family, provide trade goods for things you can't make yourself, and ideally leave something to sell for actual money. It's not much. It's never much. Medieval fishing is profitable for merchants and lords, marginal for the actual fishermen. But here's the thing, it's enough. Barely, probably, but enough to survive another week, another month. That's the constant calculation in a medieval fishing village. Not, are we thriving? But will we survive? And today, thanks to the fish and the fact that nobody drowned, the answer is yes. Your spouse is wrapping your family's share of herring in a cloth, one of the few pieces of relatively clean fabric you own. The fish are still slightly warm, freshly gutted, and they'll need to be dealt with tonight. Some smoked, some salted with your precious salt supply, some possibly eaten fresh if you're feeling reckless about winter stores. The processing tables are being cleaned, which is a generous term for rinsed with buckets of seawater and scraped with stiff brushes. Tomorrow they'll be used again, and the day after, and the day after that, in an endless cycle of catching and processing that defines village life from spring through fall. You're gathering your fish, your exhausted body, and what remains of your dignity. The walk back to your cottage is short. Everything in the village is short walking distance, but it feels like miles. Your legs are barely functioning. Your feet are pruned and blistered inside your soaked shoes. Your hands are, well, you're trying not to look at them. Other fishermen are heading home too, all looking equally destroyed. There's a camaraderie in shared suffering nods of acknowledgement, the occasional grunt that might be greeting or might be pain vocalization. Words aren't necessary. Everyone knows what everyone else just went through because they all just went through it together. Your cottage appears ahead, and it's never looked more appealing despite being a hovel that smells like fish and has a leaking roof. It represents the end of the working day, the possibility of sitting down, maybe getting out of these wet clothes. The bar is so low for comfort that slightly less miserable counts as luxury. But the day's not over yet. Those fish need processing. The fire needs tending. There's probably net mending to do. You remember seeing some tears in the net during deployment. Medieval life doesn't have clear boundaries between work time and personal time. It's all just time, all spent surviving, until you sleep and wake and do it again. Welcome to the economics of medieval fishing. Risk your life for fish. Process the fish. Preserve the fish. Trade some fish. Eat some fish. And hope you've managed the equations well enough to not starve before next fishing season. You're standing in your cottage doorway with an armload of fish, and your oldest child, the 8-year-old who came on the boat with Yui's already asleep on the straw bed. They're still wearing their soaked clothes, too exhausted to even undress, just collapsed face down in a position that looks uncomfortable but is apparently sufficient. This is what child labor looks like in practice. A small body pushed to absolute limits and then simply shutting down. Your spouse is moving around the single room with practiced efficiency, rekindling the fire that's been smoldering all day. The kindling catches. Flames lick up around larger pieces of wood, and soon there's actual heat radiating from the hearth. It's the first warmth you've felt in approximately 12 hours, and your body responds with violent shivering as it remembers that being cold is not, in fact, the natural state of existence. The fish are being laid out on the table well, the plank across barrels situation that serves as a table. Your spouse is already sorting them. These for immediate smoking, these for salting, these couple for tonight's dinner because you've both burned enough calories today to justify fresh fish. The division is practiced, mathematical, the result of years of making winter survival calculations in fish units. You're being handed a wooden cup of ale, the same weak stuff from this morning, but it's at your cottage temperature rather than North Sea temperature, which makes it taste like luxury. You're drinking it down, feeling it hit your empty stomach. You haven't eaten since that oatcake at sea, which was hours ago and subsequently vomited. Your body is running on fumes and spite. Your spouse has bred out the same dark, dense bread from breakfast, but they're doing something special tonight. There's a small pot of something on the fire, and you realize with shock that it's butter. Actual butter, probably traded from a neighbor who has a cow. Butter is expensive, reserved for special occasions or when someone's on the verge of collapse. Apparently, you qualify for the latter category. The bread is being sliced thick chunks, and your spouse is spreading butter on it while it's still warm from being near the fire. The butter melts into the bread's rough texture, and when you bite into it, the combination of salt and fat and carbohydrates hits your system like a drug. This is what medieval luxury tastes like. Buttered bread. Not fine wine. Not exotic spices. Just bread that doesn't taste exclusively like suffering. Your hands are being examined by your spouse, who makes a face at the damage. The blisters are spectacular, some burst, some intact and swollen, all of them angry red and surrounded by abraded skin. Your spouse disappears to the corner where you keep your meager medical supplies, which consists of some rags, some tallow, and hope. The treatment is simple. Your spouse takes a relatively clean rag, dips it in warm water from the pot by the fire, and starts cleaning your hands. It stings viciously as the warm water hits raw flesh and salt residue. You're gritting your teeth, trying not to show pain because medieval masculinity is apparently about suffering silently, but your spouse isn't fooled. They've seen these injuries before on themselves. On you, on every fisherman in the village. Once cleaned, tallow is being smeared on the worst spots. Tallow is rendered animal fat, normally used for candles, but it also serves as a barrier ointment. It smells like sheep and has the consistency of cold bacon grease, but it provides a protective layer over the blisters. Your spouse is wrapping your hands in strips of cloth, not bandages in any medical sense. Just fabric wound around your palms to keep the tallow in place and protect the wounds from further damage. The fish for dinner are being prepared, 2 small herring that escaped the preservation protocols. Your spouse is gutting them with quick, efficient knife work. The blade slices through fish belly. Guts are scooped out and tossed into the waste bucket, and the fish are ready for cooking in seconds. This is the same process you watched on the beach, but in miniature, in your home, by firelight. The cooking method is simple. The gutted herring are skewered on green sticks and propped over the fire. There's no grill, no pan, just fish on stick suspended over flames. The skin starts to char immediately, crackling and splitting, releasing the smell of cooking fish that's simultaneously appetizing and reminiscent of your nausea-inducing day. Your younger children are waking up, 2 of them, ages 5 and 3, roused by the smell of cooking and the activity in the cottage. They're rubbing their eyes, looking confused, because their routine has been disrupted. Normally, they'd be in bed by now, but the late return from fishing has thrown everything off schedule. Not that medieval schedules are rigid, but children like routine even when that routine is sleep on straw and eat bread. The 5-year-old is asking about the day in that way children do, with simple questions that require complex answers. Did you catch fish? Yes. Were you scared? Absolutely, but we don't say that. Can I come fishing? Not for several years. And honestly, I hope you never have to. Your spouse is answering with patience, explaining in simple terms while also managing the cooking fire and checking on the sleeping 8-year-old. The herring are done, or at least done enough by medieval standards, where cooked through is less important than hot and edible. Your spouse is sliding them off the sticks onto wooden plates, which is generous theory really just flat pieces of wood that serve as plates. The fish are being divided. The larger portions go to you and your spouse, smaller portions to the children who are awake, and a piece is being saved for the 8-year-old if they wake hungry. You're eating with your hands because forks won't be common in England for another few centuries. The fish is hot enough to hurt, and you're juggling it between fingers, blowing on it, trying to cool it while also being too hungry to wait. The skin is crispy and charred. The meat inside is flaky and smoky, and it tastes like the best thing you've ever eaten because your body is desperate for protein and calories. The children are eating with the focused intensity of the genuinely hungry. The 3-year-old is making a mess, getting fish all over their face and hands, and your spouse is too tired to care about table manners. Medieval parenting during fishing season is about keeping children alive and fed, not about etiquette. Your dinner is gone in minutes. 2 small herring barely touch the caloric deficit you're running, but it's something. Your spouse is already preparing tomorrow's food. Some of the herring are being rubbed with the household salt supply. You've got maybe 2 pounds of salt total, which has to last for all preservation needs until you can afford more. The salt is precious, literally worth its weight in silver in some markets. and you're watching it get massaged into fish flesh with a mixture of necessity and anxiety about your winter stores. The salted herring are being laid in a wooden box, layered with more salt between each fish. This box will sit in the corner of your cottage for weeks while the fish cure, releasing moisture that the salt absorbs, slowly transforming from fresh fish to preserved protein. The smell will be constant and unpleasant, but that's just background in a cottage that already smells like fish, smoke, and too many people in too small a space. Other herring are being prepared for smoking. These will go to the communal smoking shed tomorrow, adding to the village's collective preservation effort. You're expected to contribute labor to the smoking shed in exchange for using it, which means several hours tomorrow of tending the fire and rotating fish on racks. There's always more work. The work never actually ends. Your spouse is pointing out the nets in the corner they need mending before tomorrow's fishing trip. There are visible tears from today's hauls, places where the hemp has frayed or broken under the strain of heavy catches and rough handling. Net mending is skilled work, requiring knowledge of knots and techniques to maintain the net's integrity, and it's typically evening work done by firelight. You're picking up the net, bringing it close to the fire for light, and examining the damage. There are 3 significant tiers, each requiring careful repair. The mending twine-thin hemp cord specifically for this purpose in a basket somewhere. Your spouse finds it and hands it over along with a wooden needle, which is really just a shaped piece of wood with a hole for threading. Net mending with destroyed hands is a special kind of torture. The rough hemp net is abrading your fresh wounds even through the tallow and cloth wrappings. The mending twine is thin and requires finger dexterity you don't currently possess. Your hands are shaking from exhaustion and pain, making the precise knot work nearly impossible. The first tear is maybe 6 inches long. Several strands of the net have broken. You're threading the wooden needle with mending twine, which takes 3 attempts because your fingers aren't cooperating. The repair technique is called a sheet bend knot, basically weaving new twine through the existing mesh to recreate the broken strands. Each knot has to be tight enough to hold under the strain of heavy fish, but not so tight that it warps the net's shape. You're working slowly, carefully, and badly. Your spouse glances over, sees your struggle, and wordlessly takes the net. They're better at this anyway. Their hands are damaged too, but not as badly, and they've done this repair work hundreds of times. You're relegated to holding the net taut while your spouse does the actual mending, which is humiliating but also relieving because your hands genuinely cannot manage the fine motor control required. The children are getting ready for bed, which means stripping down to their underlayers and climbing onto the communal sleeping platform. The 3-year-old is already asleep again. Children at this age sleep like they're trying to recover from minor comas. The 5-year-old is fighting it, asking questions about tomorrow, about the fish, about everything, until sleep finally claims them mid-sentence. Your 8-year-old is still unconscious, hasn't moved since collapsing earlier. You're watching their breathing, making sure it's steady, because child exhaustion and child illness can look similar, and you've lost children before to things that seemed like tiredness. But they're breathing fine, just deeply asleep, their small body recovering from their first full day of adult labor. The net mending is taking over an hour. 3 tiers, countless individual knots, constant checking of tension and alignment. Your spouse is working with methodical patience, and you're just holding sections taut and trying not to fall asleep while sitting up. The fire is warm, the day's adrenaline is wearing off, and your body is screaming for sleep. Finally, the net is repaired. Not perfectly, the mended sections are visible, slightly different texture and tension but functionally sound. It'll hold tomorrow's catch, which is all that matters. Your spouse is coiling the net carefully, storing it in the corner where it won't get tangled or damaged overnight. You're being told to undress. Get out of the wet clothes that you've been wearing for approximately 18 hours. This is easier said than done. The wool tunic is essentially glued to your body by a combination of seawater, fish slime, and sweat. You're peeling it off, and it's taking skin cells with it. The fabric is heavy with absorbed water. It probably weighs 10 pounds, and when it finally comes off, you're standing there in your linen undershirt, which is also wet but at least lighter. The undershirt comes off too, and the cold air hits your bare skin. You're covered in marks. Rope burns on your shoulders where you hauled nets, bruises on your ribs from being slammed against the boat. A lovely collection of scrapes and cuts from various sharp edges encountered throughout the day. Your body is a map of the fishing industry's physical costs. Your spouse hands you a drier linen shirt from the chest. It's the backup outfit, and it smells musty from storage, but it's not soaked, which makes it luxury. You're pulling it on, feeling the relative comfort of fabric that isn't actively trying to give you hypothermia. The wet clothes are being hung near the fire to dry. They'll steam and smell terrible and probably won't fully dry before tomorrow morning when you'll put them on again, still damp, and repeat the entire process. This is the cycle. Fish in wet clothes, come home in wet clothes, dry them inadequately, wear them wet again. Medieval fishermen essentially live in a constant state of dampness, punctuated by occasional moments of being slightly less damp. Your spouse is undressing too, going through the same process of peeling off fish-slimed clothing. Their body shows similar damage, hands wrecked from gutting fish all day, back bent from hours of leaning over processing tables, the general wear of medieval manual labor. You're both falling apart in synchronized deterioration. The sleeping platform is calling. Still just wood and straw, still uncomfortable, still hosting various parasites. But right now it looks like the finest bed in Christendom. You're climbing onto it, trying not to disturb the sleeping children, finding a space between small bodies. Your spouse is banking the fire, covering it with ash to make it smolder through the night rather than burn out. This preserves the coals for easy rekindling tomorrow morning and provides some minimal heat through the night. The cottage temperature will drop significantly, but the residual warmth from the banked fire keeps it from becoming truly dangerous. The single blanket is being pulled over everyone. It doesn't cover all 6 of you adequately. Medieval families sleep in a pile, partially for warmth, partially because there's no other option. You're pressed against your spouse on one side, your 5-year-old on the other, everyone sharing body heat and probably also sharing fleas. The cottage is dark now except for the faint glow of the banked fire. The smell is a complex mixture: smoke, fish, wet wool, tallow, unwashed human. It's the smell of home, which says something about your standards. Outside, you can hear the ocean waves hitting the shore, wind whistling through the village. The same ocean that nearly killed you today is now providing ambient noise for sleep. Your body is settling into the straw, finding the familiar depressions. Every muscle is sore. Your hands throb with each heartbeat. Your back feels permanently bent. But you're horizontal, you're relatively dry, and you're not being actively threatened by the ocean. By medieval fishing standards, this is comfort. Tomorrow will be the same. Wake before dawn. Eat bread and ale. Take the boat out. Risk your life. Process fish. Mend nets. Sleep. Repeat. This is your life now. The daily reality of a medieval fishing village, where survival is the highest aspiration and fish are simultaneously your livelihood, your food, and your constant companion. Your spouse's breathing is already deepening into sleep. The children are unconscious. The village outside is quiet except for the ocean and the occasional dog. You're drifting off, exhausted beyond measure, and your last thought before sleep is wondering if tomorrow's catch will be better and immediately knowing it probably won't be. This is medieval fishing life. Brutal, repetitive, smelly, dangerous, and offering just barely enough reward to justify doing it all again tomorrow. You're being jolted awake by the church bells again, and for a moment, you're confused about whether you ever actually slept or if the bells just never stopped. Your body is screaming in protest. Every muscle has stiffened overnight into painful knots. Moving feels like trying to operate a body that's been assembled incorrectly. Your hands are especially horrible. The blisters have scabbed over in the night, and flexing your fingers cracks the scabs, releasing fresh stings of pain. The cottage is freezing. The fire has died down to barely glowing embers, and the temperature has dropped to maybe 40 degrees inside. Your breath is visible in the dim pre-dawn light seeping through wall gaps. The single blanket you shared with your family is damp with condensation from 6 people breathing moisture all night in an enclosed space. Welcome to another day in paradise. Your spouse is already moving theory, rekindling the fire, adding kindling to the embers, coaxing flames back to life. The routine is automatic, performed in the dark by someone who's done this thousands of times. Soon there's light and a bit of warmth, and the daily resurrection of the household is underway. But today is different. Today is Sunday, which you'd completely forgotten in your exhausted haze. Sunday means church is mandatory, not optional. The Lord and the church have very specific feelings about Sunday observance, and those feelings are backed by fines, public shaming, and in extreme cases, accusations of heresy. So instead of heading straight to the boat, you're going to spend several hours in a cold stone building being reminded of your sins and your obligation to tithe. The Sunday rules are strict. No work. Well, no unnecessary work, which is defined by people who don't have to fish for a living. You can't fish on Sunday. That's absolutely forbidden. You can't process fish beyond what's immediately necessary. You can't mend nets, repair boats, or do basically anything productive. You can, however, attend church for hours, which apparently doesn't count as work despite being exhausting. Your Sunday clothes are the slightly less disgusting outfit from the chest. It's the same rough wool and linen as your work clothes, but it's been designated for church and therefore gets worn less frequently and washed using that term very loosely, maybe once a month. You're pulling on the tunic, and it's stiff with old sweat and smoke residue, but it doesn't actively smell like fish guts, which makes it formal wear. The children are being roused and dressed in their equivalent Sunday outfits. The 8-year-old is moving like an arthritic old person, which makes sense given they did adult labor yesterday for the first time. They're whimpering softly while getting dressed, and your spouse is being gentle, but firm. Pain is not an excuse to miss church. Medieval parenting is heavy on the life is suffering, deal with it philosophy. Breakfast is the usual, bread and ale. The bread is even harder today if that's possible, and you're dunking it in ale to make it edible. There's no butter this morning. Yesterday's luxury is back to being too expensive for daily use. Your jaw works mechanically, chewing bread that tastes like disappointment and grain. The village is emerging from cottages, everyone heading toward the church. It's a procession of the damp and miserable. Fishermen walking stiffly from yesterday's labor, women with fish processing injuries, children stumbling along half asleep. Everyone's wearing their best clothes, which is a relative term in a fishing village where best means least offensive to God and the priest. The church is the only stone building in the village. Everything else is wood and wattle and daub, but the church is proper stone construction with a tile roof. It's been here for over a century, paid for by generations of tithes and labor. The building represents a significant portion of the village's collective wealth, which is either inspiring or depressing depending on whether you're the priest receiving tithes or the fisherman paying them. You're filing in with everyone else, and the interior is somehow colder than outside. Stone buildings are excellent at retaining cold, and this church has been gathering cold all night like it's storing it for winter. There's no heating beyond the body warmth of the congregation, and the stone walls radiate chill like they're personally offended by the concept of comfort. The seating arrangement is revealing of village hierarchy. There are a few wooden benches at the front for the reeve, the successful merchants, and the families who own land beyond just their cottages. Everyone else stands. You're standing, obviously, in the section designated for fishermen, which is toward the back and slightly to the side, as if even the church architecture recognizes that you smell like fish. The priest is Father Benedict, a man in his 40s who's relatively new to the village, only been here 5 years. He's from somewhere inland, which you can tell because he still hasn't fully adjusted to the smell. You occasionally catch him flinching when the wind shifts and carries a particularly strong whiff of the fishing industry. He's educated though can read Latin, right? And knows theology well enough to make you feel guilty about things you didn't even know were sins. The service is beginning with bells, smaller hand bells this time, rung by an altar boy who's trying very hard to look solemn but is clearly fighting sleep. The bells echo in the stone space, and everyone's standing straighter, adopting expressions of piety. Medieval church attendance is performance. You're here to be seen being faithful, because the person who doesn't attend church is the person who gets accused of ungodly behavior when something goes wrong in the village. Father Benedict is speaking in Latin, which nobody understands except him and maybe the reeve who had some education. The Latin Mass is tradition, sacred, and completely incomprehensible to the congregation. You're supposed to follow along through familiar rhythms and cues, standing when others stand, kneeling when others kneel, responding Amen when the cadence suggests it's appropriate. The kneeling is torture. The church floor is stone cold, hard stone, and you're expected to kneel on it for extended periods. Your knees, already damaged from yesterday's boat work, are grinding against stone that feels like it's actively trying to damage your joints. Around you, everyone's kneeling with varying degrees of discomfort. The elderly are barely managing it. Young children are squirming, and everyone's faces show the strain of performing piety through pain. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were genuinely devout or just performing faith out of social obligation. But kneeling here on stone with your knees screaming, you're pretty sure the distinction doesn't matter. You're going through the motions because not going through the motions has consequences, and whether that's faith or fear or pragmatism is a question for people who don't have to fish for a living. Father Benedict is moving into the sermon now. This part is in English, or at least medieval English that's comprehensible with effort. He's talking about gluttony, which is rich considering he's the best-fed person in the village thanks to his tithe income. The irony is apparently lost on him as he warns about the sin of excessive eating while you're all mentally calculating whether you'll have enough food to last the winter. The sermon is also hitting on the usual themes: obedience to God, obedience to the church, obedience to the Lord, obedience to social hierarchy. There's a strong emphasis on accepting your station in life as divinely ordained. God made you a fisherman, apparently, and questioning that arrangement is questioning God's plan, which is heresy, which leads to eternal damnation. It's a very convenient theology for people at the top of the social hierarchy. Your 8-year-old is swaying on their feet, fighting sleep with everything they have. Your spouse quietly pinches them, not hard, just enough to provide a staying awake stimulus. Falling asleep in church is noticed and commented upon, and your family doesn't need more gossip attached to its name. Village reputation is currency you can't afford to waste. Father Benedict is moving into the intercessory prayers, asking God to protect the village, bless the harvest, guard the fishermen at sea, cure the sick, and so on. This part always feels more genuine because these are real concerns. People die at sea regularly. Sickness sweeps through the village. Harvests fail. The prayers are less about abstract theology and more about practical desperation. Please God, let us survive another year. The collection is happening now. An altar boy is walking through the congregation with a wooden box, and everyone's expected to contribute. You're dropping in a small coin one of your few pennies and watching it disappear into a box that already contains the accumulated Sunday pennies of the entire village. This money funds the church, pays the priest, maintains the building, and theoretically provides for the poor, though you're pretty sure you qualify as poor and haven't seen much benefit. Your spouse is also contributing another penny, which hurts because pennies are scarce and this is 2 pennies gone in one morning. But not contributing is noticed, and being noticed for not contributing is worse than losing the money. Medieval social pressure is incredibly effective when everyone lives in close quarters and reputation determines your economic opportunities. The communion is beginning. This is the central ritual, the transformation of bread and wine into body and blood through priestly consecration. Father Benedict is performing the ritual at the altar, speaking the Latin words that affect the transformation. The theology is complex: transubstantiation, the literal conversion of substance while maintaining appearance. You don't understand the theology, but you understand that this is the most sacred part, the moment requiring absolute reverence. The congregation is queuing to receive communion. You're waiting your turn in a line that shuffles forward slowly, everyone keeping eyes down in appropriate humility. The person ahead of you is the widow who makes good alesh, receiving the communion wafer, then the wine, then moving aside. Your turn. Father Benedict is placing a small wafer on your tonguite's unleavened bread, bland and dry, and it sticks to the roof of your mouth. Then the wine, just a sip from the communal chalice. The wine is better quality than anything you drink at home, which makes sense given it's literally becoming Christ's blood. The sweet, rich, and gone too quickly. You're shuffling aside, making room for the next person, trying to look appropriately blessed. The service is winding down. More Latin, more responses you've memorized phonetically without understanding. Father Benedict is giving the final blessing, making the sign of the cross over the congregation, and releasing you back into the world with your sins theoretically absolved and your soul theoretically improved. Everyone's filing out, blinking in the sunlight that's now fully risen. This may be 9 a.m., and you've been in church for over 2 hours. Your knees are wrecked, your back is stiff, and you've contributed money you couldn't afford to a system that tells you to be grateful for your suffering. But you've also fulfilled your Sunday obligation, which means you won't be fined or shamed or suspected of heresy this week. The churchyard is becoming a social space. This is the only time the entire village gathers in one place, and people are taking advantage. Conversations are breaking out everywhere. Women discussing fish preservation techniques, men arguing about boat maintenance, teenagers eyeing each other with the awkward interest of people whose marriage options are limited to whoever else lives within walking distance. The Reeve is making announcements. Apparently, the Lord's tax collector is indeed coming this week, and everyone needs to prepare their assessments. There's audible groaning from the crowd. Taxes are paid in kind: fish, salt, labor days, and the collector always finds ways to increase what's owed. Medieval taxation is creative in its cruelty. Fishing rights tax, boat tax, salt tax, processing tax, market tax, and various fees that seem invented on the spot. Someone's asking about old Thomas, who's been sick. Apparently, he died last night. Fever, probably pneumonia, but medieval diagnosis is mostly guessing. He was maybe 50, which is old for a fisherman. His family is now in crisis because he was the primary earner, and his widow is too old to do processing work efficiently. The village will help some, but medieval charity is limited by the fact that everyone's barely surviving themselves. Father Benedict is circulating, making small talk with the more prosperous villagers while studiously avoiding extended contact with the fisherfolk. You're not offended. You wouldn't want to talk to you either, given how you smell. The priest's robes are clean, his face is well-fed, and his hands are smooth. The contrast with your congregation couldn't be more stark. Your spouse is talking with neighbors about the week's preservation work. There's organizing happening. Who has extra salt? Who needs smoking shed time? Who can spare labor for the communal tasks? Medieval village life is cooperative by necessity. You can't survive alone. So you build networks of mutual obligation. You'll help with someone's nets today. They'll help with your roof repair next month. And everyone keeps mental ledgers of who owes what. The children are playing well. The ones who have energy are playing. Your 8-year-old is sitting against the church wall, still recovering. Other children are running around the churchyard, screaming with the joy of being outside after sitting still for hours. There's a game involving a ball made of rags, and it's devolving into chaos as these things do. A stranger is in the churchyard, unusual enough to be noteworthy. He's better dressed than villagers, not rich but comfortable, and he's talking to several people. Word spreads quickly. He's a merchant's agent, looking for regular fish suppliers for a buyer in a town 2 days' journey inland. This is opportunity. A guaranteed buyer means stable income, assuming you can meet the quality and quantity requirements. Godric is already talking to the agent, negotiating on behalf of your boat cooperative. You're watching from a distance, trying to read the conversation. The agent is gesturing, probably describing requirements. Godric is nodding, calculating whether you can meet the demands. This could change everything, or it could be another empty promise from someone who'll disappear after collecting a deposit. The church bells are ringing, againa single toll marking the hour. It's time for the afternoon service. Wait, there's an afternoon service? Apparently on special Sundays there are. And today is the feast of some saint whose name you didn't catch. More church means more kneeling, more Latin, more coins in the collection box. Your knees are already protesting the idea. Your back is sending preemptive pain signals. But everyone's filing back into the church because this isn't optional. Medieval Christianity is demanding morning service, afternoon service, evening prayers at home, daily observances, feast days, fast days, and constant reminders that you're sinful and need saving. The afternoon service is mercifully shorter, maybe 45 minutes of additional kneeling and Latin. Father Benedict seems less energetic, like even he's tired of the routine. The sermon is brief. Be good, avoid sin, tithe generously. The same message as this morning but compressed. Finally, you're released. It's early afternoon, and you've spent most of the day in church. Sunday might be a rest day, but rest is relative. You're exhausted from sitting, kneeling, and standing in a cold building while being told your poverty is God's will. The rest of the day is technically free time, though there's always unofficial work, checking on drying fish, subtle net repairs that aren't technically work, planning the week's fishing. Medieval rest days are more about what you can't do than what you can. You're heading home, your family trailing behind. The cottage appears, still smelling like fish and smoke, still featuring a leaking roof and dirt floor, but it's yours. And for the rest of this Sunday, you're permitted to collapse in it, eating bread and ale, and preparing mentally for tomorrow when fishing starts again and Sunday's forced piety gives way to Monday's survival struggle. Monday morning arrives with the same church bells, the same aching body, the same terrible breakfast. But today there's an added element of dread. You're aware now. Yesterday was your first fishing day, done in ignorant shock. Today, you know exactly what's coming, which somehow makes it worse. Anticipatory suffering is a special medieval torture, your brain helpfully replaying every moment of yesterday's misery while your body refuses to cooperate with getting out of bed. Your hands are a disaster. The scabbed blisters have cracked open during the night despite your best efforts to keep them still, and there's a concerning warmth around some of them that might be the beginning of infection. Medieval infection treatment is essentially hope it doesn't kill you, so this is less than ideal. Your spouse is rewrapping them with fresh cloth strips and more tallow, but you both know this is just delaying the inevitable worsening. The walk to the harbor feels longer today. Your legs are stiff from yesterday's unaccustomed labor, and each step sends complaints up through your knees and into your lower back. Other fishermen are visible in the pre-dawn gloom, all moving with the same rigid gait of people whose bodies are protesting employment. There's no cheerful morning banter, just grunts of acknowledgement as you pass neighbors who are equally miserable. The boat is waiting, looking somehow more decrepit in the dawn light. You notice things you missed before: the significant crack in one of the ribs, the way the mast leans slightly off-center, a patch in the hull that's newer than the surrounding wood and definitely not sealed properly. This vessel is a collection of repairs holding together through prayer and tar, and you're about to trust your life to it again. Today's boarding process is marginally less humiliating. You've learned the technique: grab the gunnel, use momentum, swing your leg up while pushing with your arms, flop inward with slightly more control. You still end up sprawled in the bilge water, but at least you're in the boat. Progress is relative in medieval terms. William arrives looking worse than yesterday. There are dark circles under his eyes, and he's moving like every joint hurts. Welcome to fishing life, kid. The first week is supposedly the worst, your body adapting to demands it was never designed for. Godric claims it gets easier after a month, but Godric also claims the boat is seaworthy, so his credibility is questionable. The nets are being loaded, but there's a problem. The net you mended last night is showing new damage. Apparently your repair work wasn't sufficient, or the net is so degraded that fixing one section just stressed others. Godric is examining it with increasing frustration, muttering about needing a new net, which costs money nobody has. For now, he's doing emergency repairs with twine, his gnarled fingers working knots in the dim light. This delay means you're launching later than ideal. Other boats are already heading out, their sails visible against the lightening sky. Late departure means competing for fishing grounds, potentially finding spots already worked over by earlier boats. Medieval fishing is competitive. There's only so much ocean close enough to reach safely, and everyone's trying to catch from the same limited resource. The rowing out is harder today because your hands are damaged and your arms are already fatigued. Each pull on the oar sends pain shooting through your palms where blisters have reopened. The cloth wrapping helps marginally, but soon it's soaked with seawater and blood, becoming just another layer of wet fabric between you and suffering. The sea is rougher today, the wind is up, and waves are running maybe 5 to 6 feet even in the harbor. Once you clear the protective outcropping, it's going to be worse. Godric is eyeing the conditions with the expression of someone doing risk calculations. Is the potential catch worth the danger? Apparently yes, because you're continuing outward rather than turning back. The seasickness hits faster today. Your body remembers yesterday's nausea and helpfully recreates it with minimal provocation. You're leaning over the side, vomiting up your breakfast of bread and ale, and this time it's somehow more humiliating because you should be getting used to this. William is also vomiting, which is cold comfort. At least you're suffering in company. The fishing grounds are crowded. At least 5 other boats are already here, their nets deployed, floating markers dotting the water. Godric is cursing, looking for space that won't interfere with existing nets. Tangling your net with someone else's is a serious offense, leading to damaged equipment and potentially violent confrontations. Medieval maritime law is informal but backed by the threat of communal retribution. You're finding a spot finally, maybe a quarter mile from the nearest boat, and the nets are going over. The deployment is rough today. The waves are making everything harder, and the net keeps tangling on itself. At one point, a wave hits just as you're feeding net overboard, and about 20 feet of it goes over in a jumbled mass. You're frantically trying to untangle it while it sinks, and it's probably a disaster down there, mesh twisted and inefficient. The waiting begins, but today there's no rest. Godric has decided this rough weather is perfect for line fishing. Apparently fish are more active when the water's churned up. You're being handed a line, Shown again how to bait the hook with chunks of yesterday's unsold fish that have spent the night becoming even more pungent. The handline technique requires holding the cord, feeling for the subtle tug that indicates a fish taking the bait. In calm water, this is apparently quite effective. In 6-foot swells with the boat pitching and rolling, it's like trying to feel a whisper during a thunderstorm. The line is jerking and pulling with every wave, and distinguishing between wave motion and fish bite is beyond your current skill level. You're getting false alarms constantly. Every surge feels like a fish, and you're pulling up the line only to find the bait still there, slightly more degraded from seawater exposure. William is having better luck, as actually caught 2 small fish already. Some species you don't recognize but that Godric approves of with a grunt. The cold is worse today. The wind is cutting through your wet wool like it's not even there, and your core temperature is dropping. Your hands are going numb, which has the silver lining of reducing pain but the significant downside of making the fishing line work nearly impossible. You can barely feel the cord in your fingers, and you're relying on visual cues to know if you're even holding it correctly. A larger wave hits broadside, and the boat rolls dramatically. Water comes over the gunwale in a sheet, soaking everyone and adding significantly to the bilge. John is immediately bailing, and you're joining him, both of you scooping frantically because the boat is sitting noticeably lower in the water. The bailer is slippery in your numb hands, and twice you drop it, watching it float in the bilge before grabbing it again. The nets are being checked early. Godric is impatient or worried about the weather worsening. The haul is disappointing. Maybe a dozen fish, half the catch of yesterday. The rough water has apparently scattered the fish or made them less likely to swim into nets. Medieval fishing is unpredictably a great catch one day means nothing about tomorrow's prospects. The fish are smaller too, mostly herring but undersized ones. Godric is debating whether to even keep some of them. Really small fish aren't worth the processing effort versus their food value. But waste is unconscionable when you're this close to subsistence, so everything's being kept. Small fish will be eaten fresh or given to families with young children who need the nutrition. You're untangling fish from the net again, and the process hasn't become any more pleasant with repetition. Today's fish seem slimier, or maybe your hands are just more sensitive to texture now that they're damaged. One fish is still alive somehow, flopping weakly in the net, and you're supposed to kill it. The wooden club is handed to you, and you're hesitating because hitting living things in the head is not instinctive, even when those things are fish. Godric is watching your hesitation with disapproval. You're swinging the club, but weakly, and the fish is hurt but not dead. A second swing, harder this time, and there's a crack that might be skull or might be your imagination. The fish goes still. You've killed something through incompetence and multiple attempts, which is possibly worse than killing efficiently. The net is going back out, but during deployment, disaster strikes. The net snags on something, maybe the boat's own hull, maybe debris, and instead of sliding smoothly into the water, it jerks hard. The sudden tension pulls the net from your damaged hands, and a significant section goes overboard in an uncontrolled rush, tangling as it goes. Godric is livid. That's expensive net, and it's now twisted underwater in ways that will require extensive recovery work and probably significant repair. He's yelling, actual angry yelling, not just frustrated muttering, and while it's mostly directed at the situation, you're definitely included in the blame. Your incompetence has damaged the cooperative's equipment, which affects everyone's livelihood. The net recovery is a nightmare. You're hauling up tangled hemp that weighs twice what it should because it's caught on itself in underwater knots. Every pull requires coordinated effort from all 4 of you, and the boat is rocking violently, making the work dangerous. At one point, William nearly goes overboard when a wave hits during a pull saved only by John grabbing his shirt at the last moment. The recovered net is a mess. There are new tears from the stress. The mesh is twisted in ways that will take hours to fix, and sections are so tangled that cutting them free might be the only option, which means replacing that portion entirely. This is a financial disaster, for the cooperative nets are expensive, and this damage might require purchasing new sections from the netmaker, who charges prices that take months to pay off. Godric is making the decision to head back early. Between the poor catch, the damaged net, and the worsening weather, continuing is pointless. You're actually relieved. The prospect of hours more in this boat was daunting. But early return means less income, which means less food, which means your family survives on even thinner margins this week. The sail is being raised for the return journey, and the wind is now strong enough to be genuinely dangerous. The boat is heeling hard, and Godric is fighting the steering or to keep you pointed toward shore. Waves are breaking over the bow regularly, and bailing has become a constant occupation. You and William are scooping and throwing in a rhythm that's almost meditative, if meditation involved freezing water and existential dread. The shore seems to take forever to approach. Distance that took maybe 40 minutes this morning is taking over an hour to cover against wind and wave. Your arms are dead from bailing, your back is locked in position, and you're wondering if this is how fishing villages maintain their population through sheer stubborn refusal to let the ocean win. Finally, mercifully, you're in the harbor. The protected water feels calm by comparison, though it's still choppy enough to require careful navigation. The beach is visible, and other boats are already there. Apparently several boats made the same early return decision. The shared defeat is oddly comforting. The boat beaches with a grinding scrape. You're climbing out into the shallows, and your legs nearly give out. Standing on solid ground after hours on a rocking boat creates a strange disconnect. The world feels like it's still moving, and you're swaying on the beach like you're drunk. The catch is being unloaded, and it's visibly pathetic. Maybe 15 fish total, compared to yesterday's much larger haul. The processing tables are barely needed. This catch will be gutted and distributed in an hour. Your family's share will be maybe 4 fish, which is not enough for a week's meals even with severe rationing. Your spouse sees you approaching with the meager catch and understands immediately. There's no accusation in their expression. They know fishing is unpredictable, but there's calculation happening. For fish means relying more heavily on bread, stretching the ale supply, possibly trading something you can't afford to trade for additional food. The damaged net is being spread on the beach for assessment. It's worse in full light, multiple tiers, hopelessly tangled sections, and general degradation that suggests the entire net is approaching the end of its useful life. Godric is talking about costs, about repair versus replacement, about how this affects the cooperative's finances. You're being asked to contribute more to the repair fund, money you don't have. This is the reality of medieval fishing. Some days you survive, some days you fall behind, and the margin between the two is a few fish and some luck. Today was a falling behind day, and tomorrow you'll try again, with damaged equipment, damaged hands, and diminishing hope that this gets easier. The week grinds forward with relentless similarity. Tuesday brings slightly better fishing, but a torn sail that takes hours to patch with scraps that don't quite match. Wednesday delivers a decent catch, but also a storm that keeps you on shore, watching potential income drift away with each hour of forced idleness. Thursday sees you back on the water, and you're starting to develop those calluses Godric promised. Your hands are transforming from blistered meat into something resembling leather, which is progress of a sort. By Friday, you've achieved a grim competence. You can board the boat without completely embarrassing yourself. The seasickness still hits, but you've learned to work through it, vomiting efficiently over the side and continuing with your tasks. Your body has accepted that suffering is the baseline, and anything less than acute agony barely registers anymore. This is what adaptation looks like in medieval terms. Not thriving, just surviving with incrementally less complaint. The village rhythm is becoming clear. Every day is fishing, processing, preserving, repairing, with Sundays enforced church attendance breaking the cycle. The same faces appear at the same times. Fishermen at dawn on the beach, women at processing tables by mid-morning, children running errands or learning trades in the afternoon. It's a community bound by shared industry and shared suffering, everyone's survival interlinked through cooperative labor and mutual dependence. Your cottage has achieved a new level of fish saturation. There are salted herring curing in the corner box, smoked fish hanging from the rafters, fish being prepared for tomorrow's bait, fish scales ground into the dirt floor. You're sleeping in fish smell, eating surrounded by fish products, wearing clothes impregnated with fish essence. The village joke that fishermen's children are born smelling like herringies starting to seem less like humor and more like biological fact. The hygiene situation is dire, though you're only now truly appreciating how dire. You haven't properly bathed since arriving in this medieval nightmare, and properly bathed would require resources and facilities that simply don't exist in a fishing village. Water is for drinking, cooking, and boat-related activities, not for the luxury of personal cleanliness. Your body has developed a patina of grime, fish slime, salt residue, smoke particles, sweat, and general biological accumulation that's becoming a second skin. The village does have a bathhouse of sorts, really just a larger cottage with a fire pit and some wooden tubs, but it operates only on Saturdays, and using it costs money. You're doing the mental calculation. Spend precious pennies on bathing, or use that money for salt to preserve more fish. The fish win every time because fish means survival, and being clean is a luxury that medieval economics can't support. Your clothes are a separate horror. The same wool tunic and linen undershirt have been worn for a week straight, day and night, soaked in seawater daily and dried inadequately by the fire. The fabric is stiff with salt and sweat. The armpits have achieved a level of ripeness that makes you avoid raising your arms unnecessarily. And there are stains whose origins you've deliberately chosen not to investigate. Medieval laundry happens maybe monthly, involves beating clothes with rocks in cold water, and provides results that are less dirty rather than clean. The communal aspects of village life are becoming clear in uncomfortable ways. There's no privacy, no personal space, no concept that your business is your own. Everyone knows everyone's financial situation, marital problems, health issues, and minor scandals. The woman 3 cottages down is definitely having an affair with the baker everyone knows. Everyone discusses it, and somehow this is just accepted as communal entertainment. Gossip is currency in a medieval village. Who's thriving? Who's failing? Who's been seen talking to whom? This information flows constantly, particularly among the women at processing tables and men at the alehouse. You're learning that reputation matters enormously. Being known as a hard worker opens opportunities for cooperative ventures, while being labeled lazy or dishonest closes doors permanently. The alehouse is where men gather in the evening, a cottage slightly larger than others with benches and barrels of ale. It's not quite a pub. There's no commercial transaction beyond paying for ale, more like a communal space where exhausted fishermen drink away their pain and discuss village matters. You're sitting on a rough bench, drinking ale that tastes like liquid bread gone wrong, surrounded by men who look like they're slowly being ground down by existence. The conversations are revealing. There's discussion of the tax collector's upcoming visit and strategies to hide assets or underreport catches. There's debate about whether the Lord's latest demand 3 extra labor days for road repair is legal under feudal obligations, though legal is a fluid concept when the Lord has armed men and you have fishing nets. Someone's proposing a petition to the Lord about fishing rights, which everyone agrees is a good idea that absolutely no one will actually pursue because confronting authority is dangerous. Old Godric is holding court, telling stories of legendary catches and storms that make current conditions seem mild. There's the tale of the great storm of 30 years ago that sank 7 boats and killed 20 men. There's the story of the giant cod, probably exaggerated, that took 3 men to haul aboard. These stories serve a purpose beyond entertainment. They're community history, lessons about ocean dangers, and reminders that fishing has always been brutal and probably always will be. The younger men are discussing marriage prospects, which is depressing because the options are limited to village daughters, and there's maybe 5 eligible young women among a dozen hopeful men. Medieval marriage in fishing villages is practical. You're looking for someone who can process fish efficiently, bear children who'll survive long enough to become labor, and tolerate living in a one-room cottage that smells like death. Romance isn't part of the equation. Your spouse, you're realizing, is actually quite competent by village standards. Their fish processing speed is above average. They manage the household efficiently despite minimal resources, and they've kept 3 children alive through infancy, which is a genuine achievement given medieval child mortality rates. The marriage was probably arranged by families looking to consolidate fishing cooperative shares, but it's functional, which is the best most people achieve. The children's futures are predetermined by economics. Your 8-year-old is already a fisherman in training. They'll be doing this job until their body gives out or the sea takes them. The 5-year-old will likely follow the same path if male, or learn fish processing if female. The 3-year-old's prospects depend entirely on whether they survive the next few years of childhood diseases, accidents, and general medieval dangers that kill children with brutal efficiency. Education is not a consideration. There's no school, no literacy training, no opportunity for advancement beyond becoming marginally more successful at fishing. The priest can read and write. The reeve has some education, but these are positions you're born into or achieve through connections you don't have. Your children will be fishermen and fish processors, and their children will be the same, in an endless cycle of hereditary subsistence. The health situation in the village is becoming apparent through observation. Old Thomas died last week from fever. His body was buried in the churchyard after a brief service, and his family is already struggling without his income. There's a child with a persistent cough that sounds like it's turning into something serious. The man who operates the smoking shed has a limp from an old boat accident that never healed properly, and now he's basically disabled in a society with no disability support. Medical care consists of the priest's prayers, herbal remedies from women who've accumulated folk knowledge, and hope. Serious injuries or illnesses are essentially death sentences. That cough in the child? Probably pneumonia or tuberculosis. And without antibiotics, it's just a matter of time. The skin sores you're developing on your hands? Could be nothing. Could be the start of infection that spreads and kills you. You're supposed to just hope for the best and prepare for the worst. The concept of preventive medicine doesn't exist beyond vague notions of keeping humors balanced. You're supposed to avoid getting too wet, too cold, too hot, or too anything, which is impossible when your job is being wet and cold for 12 hours daily. The medical advice is essentially don't get sick, which is about as useful as it sounds. The village has lost people this year. Hearing the accounting at the alehouse. 3 men to fishing accidents, 2 children to disease, 1 woman in childbirth, old Thomas to fever, and a teenager who simply disappeared and was probably taken by the sea during a solo fishing attempt. That's 7 deaths in a village of maybe 150 people, a mortality rate of nearly 5% annually. This is normal, apparently. Medieval life is cheap, and fishing village life is cheaper still. But there's also life continuing stubbornly forward. A wedding is being planned for next month, that baker's apprentice and the netmaker's daughter, a union that makes economic sense for both families. There's a baby born last week to much celebration because it survived the first critical days and might actually make it. Gardens are being tended for the few vegetables that grow in this salty coastal soil. Life persists not through hope but through sheer biological momentum. The church's role is becoming clearer. It's the only institution providing any sense of order, meaning, or community cohesion beyond economic necessity. Father Benedict might be well-fed while his congregation starves, but he also provides the rituals that mark births, marriages, deaths. The church calendar structures time in a world without clocks or calendars. Sunday services might be tedious, but they're the one guaranteed gathering of the entire community. The feudal obligations are a constant background pressure. You owe the Lord fishing rights fees, paid in fish. You owe labor days for road and bridge maintenance. You owe a portion of your catch as tax. The church gets its tithe. The boat cooperative needs maintenance funds. What's left is supposed to feed your family, provide trade goods, and maybe, if you're extraordinarily lucky, accumulate into savings that could improve your situation. But improvement is largely fantasy. The economic structure is designed to keep you exactly where you are, productive enough to generate value for those above you, but never prosperous enough to change your station. Social mobility in a medieval fishing village means maybe becoming the respected elder fisherman like Godric, still doing the same work but with slightly more authority to make decisions about which patch of ocean to fish. The week's catch has been mixed overall, some good days, some bad, averaging out to barely sufficient. Your family has fish to eat, fish to preserve for winter, and a few fish to trade for the things you can't produce. Salt, occasionally flour to supplement your bread, maybe a replacement tool when something breaks. It's subsistence with occasional moments of sufficiency, never abundance. Saturday arrives with the bathing decision. Your spouse has decided the family can afford the bathhouse this week, probably because the collective smell has reached a level that's offensive even by medieval fishing village standards. You're walking to the bathhouse in the afternoon, joining a line of equally desperate people waiting for access to hot water and wooden tubs. The bathhouse experience is communal and marginally humiliating. There's no private bathing, everyone shares the same large tubs, water being too precious and heating it too labor-intensive for individual baths. You're climbing into a wooden tub with 3 other men, all of you settling into water that's been used by at least a dozen people already and shows it. The water is gray, scummy with the accumulated filth of prior bathers, and still somehow the best thing you've experienced all week. The warmth is extraordinary. Your muscles, locked in permanent tension from fishing labor, are beginning to relax. The heat is penetrating your cold-soaked bones, and for the first time in a week, you're not shivering. You're submerging as much as possible, letting the water dirty as it soften the grime on your skin. Actual cleaning requires a rag and some soft soap made from ash and animal fat. You're scrubbing at your skin, watching layers of filth dissolve into the already dirty water. Your skin underneath is pale, almost unfamiliar, marked with bruises, cuts, and the general damage of medieval fishing life. The other men in the tub are doing the same, everyone scrubbing in companionable silence. Your hair is a disaster matted with salt and fish oil. It's formed clumps that resist combing. You're dunking your head, using the soap, trying to restore some semblance of normal hair texture. The process is partially successful. Your hair is cleaner but still coarse, still smelling faintly of fish no matter how much you wash. Fish smell has permeated your body at a cellular level. The bathing is time-limited, get maybe 20 minutes before you're expected to vacate for the next group. You're climbing out, water streaming off you, and being handed a rough cloth that serves as a towel. The cloth is communal, already damp from previous users, but it's sufficient to remove excess water. You're dressing in your slightly less filthy church clothes, saving the work clothes for Monday's fishing. Your family has bathed in shifts. Your spouse went first with the younger children. You're in the second group with the 8-year-old. Everyone looks marginally more human afterward, though clean is a relative term when your clothes are still the same fish-saturated garments you've worn all week. But there's a psychological improvement. Bathing marks the week's end, a ritual of minimal renewal before Sunday's church and Monday's return to fishing. Sunday arrives again with its mandatory church attendance, and the cycle repeats. Father Benedict delivers essentially the same sermon with minor variations. You kneel on the same cold stone floor, drop coins you can't afford in the collection box, and receive communion that briefly makes you feel part of something larger than subsistence survival. The service is tedious, but it's also predictable, a routine in a life where unpredictability usually means disaster. The afternoon is free, and you're spending it on boat maintenance. The cooperative has decided to properly recaulk a section of the hull that's been leaking worse each day. This means heating tar, jamming Oakumthat's rope fibers into the seams between planks, and sealing it with hot tar. The work is skilled, requiring care to maintain the hull's integrity, and it's surprisingly satisfying to see problems fixed rather than just managed. Godric is supervising, teaching the younger men the techniques. This is how knowledge transfers in medieval society, not through books or formal education, but through watching, doing, making mistakes, and gradually developing competence. William is learning to judge tar temperature by eye, to feel when oakum is properly seated, to recognize a good seal versus a temporary patch. The boat maintenance becomes a social event. Other cooperative members arrive to help, and their families come too, creating an impromptu gathering. Children play around the beached boat. Women discuss preservation techniques. Men work on the hull while sharing the week's stories. This is community. Not abstract togetherness, but practical cooperation born of shared necessity. The sun is setting over the ocean, painting the sky in colors that would be beautiful if you had energy for aesthetic appreciation. The boat is repaired. The week's work is complete, and tomorrow begins another cycle. You're watching the sunset with your fellow fishermen, all of you temporarily still, momentarily free from labor. Someone starts Sinjinga work song about the sea, and others join in. The voices are rough, untrained, but unified. The song is old, passed down through generations of fishermen. Verses about storms survived and catches landed and men lost to the waves. It's mournful and defiant simultaneously, a musical expression of fishing life. We suffer, we survive, we continue. You're joining the song, your voice adding to the chorus. The words are familiar. No, you've heard them all week at the boat, during net hauling, in moments when rhythm helps coordinate labor. Singing together creates brief unity, a reminder that individual suffering is shared suffering, and shared suffering is somehow more bearable. The song ends, and people drift toward their cottages. The day is done. The week is done. Tomorrow brings church again. Then Monday brings fishing again. And the cycle continues because stopping isn't an option. You're walking home with your family, your 8-year-old holding your damaged hand carefully, avoiding the worst of the healing blisters. Your cottage appears in the twilight, smoke rising from the banked fire inside. Still a hovel, still smelling like fish, still featuring a dirt floor and leaking roof. But it's shelter, it's home, and tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all again. This is medieval fishing village life. Brutal, repetitive, communal, and offering just enough reward to justify another day of trying. You've survived a week. Most people survive many weeks, many years, entire lifetimes of this. The human capacity for adaptation is remarkably already thinking of this life as normal, the initial shock fading into routine acceptance. This is how systems perpetuate. People adapt, survive, and eventually stop imagining alternatives because imagination requires energy better spent on survival. The stars are emerging, the same stars that guided ancient sailors and will guide future ones. The ocean is settling into its evening rhythm, waves hitting the shore in steady percussion. The village is quieting, families retreating into cottages, preparing for sleep and tomorrow's labor. You're part of this now, integrated into the cycle, just another fisherman in an endless succession of fishermen stretching back centuries and forward into an indeterminate future. This is what you wouldn't survive. Not the dramatic dangers, though those are real, but the grinding constancy, the daily repetition of cold, wet, exhausting labor for marginal reward, the lack of comfort, privacy, cleanliness, or hope for improvement, the acceptance that this is life, that your children will live the same life, and that survival is the highest achievement you can reasonably expect. Medieval fishing village life isn't a romantic adventure or a historical curiosity. It's a brutally efficient system for extracting fish from the ocean and extracting labor from humans, with just enough return to perpetuate itself. You're a component in this system now, and like everyone else, you'll continue because the alternative is starvation or social exile, neither of which are actual alternatives. The cottage door closes behind you. The fire is glowing. Your family is settling for sleep. Outside, the ocean continues its eternal rhythm, indifferent to human suffering, waiting for tomorrow when you'll return to its cold embrace and try again to wrest survival from its depths. This is the reality you wouldn't last in on because you couldn't do the work, but because modern life has conditioned you to expect more than mere survival. Medieval fishermen didn't expect more. They woke, worked, ate, slept, and repeated until they couldn't anymore. That acceptance, that grinding patience with endless hardship, is what you truly wouldn't survive. But here, in this medieval moment, you've survived a week, and tomorrow, you'll try for another. The cottage is settling into its nighttime quiet now, the kind of stillness that comes when exhausted bodies finally stop moving. Your breathing is slowing, matching the rhythm of the waves outside, that gentle percussion of water meeting shore that's been the soundtrack to this entire week. The fire has burned down to embers, casting the softest orange glow across the walls, and in this light, even the rough wattle and daub seems almost peaceful, almost welcoming. Your family is already drifting into sleep around you. You can hear the gentle breathing of your children, the subtle shift of your spouse settling into the straw. The smell of fish and smoke and life lived close to the bone has become familiar, no longer offensive, just the scent of home. Outside, the village is quiet, just the occasional distant sound of a dog or the creak of a cottage settling. All the fishermen and their families resting before tomorrow's labor begins again. But tomorrow feels far away now, separated from this moment by the soft barrier of sleep. The ocean will still be there in the morning. The nets will still need mending. The fish will still need catching. But right now, in this gentle darkness, none of that seems urgent. Your body is sinking into the straw, finding the familiar hollows and curves, and the discomfort you noticed so acutely at the beginning of the week has faded into just another part of rest. You can almost feel yourself floating, suspended between the week that was and the week that will be, held in this moment of complete stillness. The medieval world outside continues its slow turning, the stars wheeling overhead, the tide shifting, the endless cycle of survival and work and rest. But here, inside this small cottage, time has gentled into something soft and forgiving. Let yourself drift now. Let the week's struggles fade like waves retreating from shore. Let the warmth of sleep pull you down into its depths. The fishing village will be there when you wake. The ocean will still be calling. But for now, you've earned this rest. Close your eyes. Feel the weight of the blanket. Hear the breathing of your family. And let it all go. Sweet dreams. And may your modern bed feel especially comfortable tonight.